You decide to raise your hand. Simple, voluntary, a conscious choice. But what if that decision had already been made? In the early 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet ran an experiment that would ripple through the philosophy of free will like a shockwave through calm water. He asked subjects to perform a basic task, flex their wrist, but do it at a time of their own choosing, not when told, not on command, just when it felt right. They sat in a chair, watched a dot sweep across a clock face, and waited for the urge to act. When they felt it, when the decision arose, they moved. Electrodes were attached to their scalps, their brains were monitored, and what Libet found was unsettling. A surge of electrical activity, called the readiness potential, began building in the brain before the subject became aware of their own decision. About 350 milliseconds before the movement, the conscious intention appeared, but the brain's motor cortex was already preparing, already moving toward action. Almost half a second earlier, the choice was an afterthought, like a leaf thinking it commands the wind. This was the crack in the foundation, a whisper that maybe free will isn't what it seems. If your brain makes the decision before you do, then who or what is really in control? Libet's conclusions were careful. He didn't say free will was dead, only that it may not be the origin point. He proposed a middle ground, a veto, that consciousness could step in, cancel the action, stop the impulse, but even that is shaky. Later studies challenged his interpretation. Some questioned the timing. Others asked if the readiness potential was really a sign of a decision at all. Still, the question stayed. What is the self, if the self isn't steering? What does it mean to choose, if the body begins before the mind arrives? And here's where it gets more slippery. Imagine all your actions are just echoes of unseen forces. The brain shaped by biology, by evolution, by childhood, by chemicals, by things you never chose. And then those things make the choice. You think you decided to call an old friend, but the thought arose uninvited, like a bubble surfacing in still water. You think you picked tea over coffee, but perhaps it was fatigue, blood sugar, or an invisible neural pattern you don't even know exists. You are the stage, not the actor. And the performance was written long before the curtain rose. Libet's experiment doesn't prove anything absolute, but it plants a seed, a doubt, a ghost in the machinery of the self. Because even if you still believe in choice, it forces you to ask, where does that choice begin? And if you trace it all the way back, do you ever find a moment that wasn't already in motion? If the brain fires first, and you follow, then maybe you're not the author of your actions. Maybe you are the story itself, being read aloud by something else. And maybe that something never asks for your permission. It just turns the page. Picture a vast intelligence, not a god, not a spirit, just knowledge. Total, perfect knowledge. A mind that knows the location and momentum of every particle in the universe, every atom, every wave, every flicker of energy, down to the smallest fragment. This is Laplace's demon, a thought experiment proposed by the French mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace in the 19th century. He imagined a universe made entirely of cause and effect. No randomness, no chance, just one great chain of events, each link forged by the one before. And if a mind could know the present state of all things, it could see the future and the past. Not guess, not estimate, no, perfectly. The demon watches the universe like a clock, not ticking, not changing, just unfolding, gear by gear, exactly as it must. In such a world, free will is a mirage. You think you choose your breakfast, but that choice was already embedded in the atoms of the Big Bang, already curled into the DNA of your ancestors, already written in the angle of sunlight through your kitchen window. Everything you do was always going to happen. Not because you're a puppet, but because you are a consequence. Your thoughts are ripples in the river of time. You didn't start the current, you only move with it, and that's the terror of Laplace's demon. Because it leaves no room for freedom, no wiggle, no spark of unpredictability, only inevitability, perfectly calculated. But the demon is hypothetical, a metaphor. In truth, the universe may not be so clean. Quantum mechanics tells us there's randomness, probabilities, events with no clear cause, a particle here, or there, or nowhere at all. But randomness isn't freedom either, it's just chaos. And if your choices are either determined or random, where is the space for a self, for an I that decides? The demon doesn't care, it doesn't need you, it sees everything in full, like a book already written, with every sentence in place. No edits, no surprises, only the illusion of choice, printed in ink you didn't spill. And maybe that's the hardest truth of all. That freedom isn't something we have. It's something we feel, like standing on a train, convinced we're walking, when really, the tracks go only one direction, and the train was never yours to drive. You walk into a store, you see two identical shirts, one red, one blue. You reach out, choose the red. You think it was you, your taste, your mood, your decision. But what if that choice was already made, not by fate, not by physics, but by architecture, the way the shirts were lit, the scent in the air, the memory of a childhood toy buried deep in your subconscious, tugging your hand before you knew why? This is the illusion of choice, the idea that what we call free will is just a story the mind tells after the fact. And the evidence is everywhere. People drink more coffee when it's served in brown mugs, vote differently based on the order of names on a ballot, feel more generous when holding something warm. Tiny things, invisible triggers, quiet nudges. We don't see them, we only see the choice, and so we believe in it. Like a magician's audience, watching the hand and missing the trick, your brain is a master of narrative. It wants reasons, explanations, coherence. So when a decision appears already bubbling up from below, it wraps it in a bow. I did this, I meant this, I chose this, even if it didn't. Studies show the brain often acts before the conscious mind knows why. Split-second judgments, gut feelings, reflexes cloaked in meaning. You say you knew she was the one, but maybe your pupils dilated, maybe her voice hit a frequency you couldn't hear. Maybe your neurons lit up from something so old, so buried, that it never needed your permission. And now you're in love. Not because you decided to be, but because you were led. And this doesn't make you less human. It makes you more mysterious. Because if choice is a myth, then so is blame, so is pride, so is the entire architecture of justice, morality, regret. If we are just weather systems in human form, clouds forming, storming, passing, then what is there to control? What is there to praise? What is there to forgive? Maybe choice is not a power. Maybe it is a shadow. And maybe that shadow moves long after the light has gone. Maybe you are not the decider, only the witness. Watching your life unfold, moment by moment, like a dream you think you're awake in, but never quite are. You are standing at a crossroads, the path splits, one trail winds left into mist, the other veers right beneath a canopy of trees. You pause, you weigh, you choose, or so it seems. Now imagine that every choice you did not make still happened, not in theory. In reality, a universe where you turned left, another where you turned right, one where you stayed, exactly where you were. All of them, real. All of them, true. This is the garden of forking paths, a story, a metaphor, a model of time that does not move like a river, but branches like a tree. It comes from the mind of Jorge Luis Borges, a writer who built worlds inside sentences. In his story, a man discovers a novel in which every decision leads to every outcome. Nothing is erased, every version persists. It is not a story, it is a labyrinth. And so is time. In this garden, there is no single path, no one future, no lone past, only possibility, blooming in all directions. Every time you blink, the garden branches. You say yes, you say no, you wait, you speak, you leave, you stay. Each act cracks the world open, and something else steps through. In one path, you missed the train. In another, you boarded. In a third, the train never came. And each version of you lives there, unaware of the others. So where is the real you? The one who married young, or late, or not at all. The one who stayed home, or traveled across the sea. The one who forgave, or didn't. If all paths exist, then the idea of choice begins to wither, because to choose is to collapse possibility. But in this garden, nothing collapses, everything is preserved. A maze of timelines, infinite and alive. The philosopher David Lewis called it modal realism, the idea that all possible worlds are as real as this one. Not imagination, not metaphor, existence. You chose tea, another you chose coffee, another chose nothing at all. All of them are you, and none of them can claim to be the original. There is no original, only divergence, and in that infinite orchard of outcomes, what does it mean to choose? When the path you walk is only one leaf among billions, does your step still matter? Maybe it does. Maybe not for the world, but for you. Because even if every path is taken, you only remember one, only feel one, only carry the weight of one. And so the choice still shapes you, even if it did not change the garden, and perhaps that is the only freedom that remains. Not the power to alter reality, but the burden of walking through it, one step at a time, knowing there is no way back. Two hemispheres, left and right. One skull, one brain, one self, divided. In the mid-20th century, surgeons began performing a radical procedure for patients with severe epilepsy. They cut the corpus callosum, the bundle of nerves connecting the two halves of the brain. The seizures stopped, but something stranger began. The patients were fine. They spoke, walked, laughed, lived. But when researchers looked closer, cracks appeared. When information was sent only to the right hemisphere, the left where language lives, knew nothing. A picture of a snow scene was shown to the right brain. A shovel appeared in the left hand. When asked why, the patient speaking from the left brain said it was to clean the chicken coop because the left brain didn't see the snow. But it still needed a reason, so it invented one. This was not deception. It was explanation. The interpreter, at work. Your brain is not one voice, it is many. And sometimes, those voices don't speak the same language. In these split-brain patients, the hands could fight each other. One buttoned a shirt, the other unbuttoned it. One picked a snack, the other pushed it away. Two wills, two centers of awareness, two selves, quietly arguing in a body that looked whole. So who was the real person? The speaker? The listener? The chooser? The hand? The truth is, there may not be one. Just pieces, stitched together by habit, by memory, by story, and most of the time it works. But not always. Even in ordinary brains, the illusion of unity is fragile. You are the voice in your head, but also the stomach that growls, the heart that races, the skin that flinches before thought arrives. You are the sum of parts that don't always agree, and that is what the split-brain patients reveal. Not brokenness, but exposure. They show what we all are beneath the surface, a parliament of signals, a conversation, sometimes a war, and the idea of a singular will, a myth, convenient, beautiful, but false. Because if one brain can split into two minds, then how many are you? How many fragments whisper when you speak? How many selves decide when you move? You are a story being told by a chorus, and sometimes the chorus is out of tune. Still, you walk. Still, you live. Still, you feel like one. But the next time you catch yourself hesitating, second-guessing, changing course midstream, ask yourself, who made that call, and what other version of you didn't? The split is not a wound, it is a window, and through it, you might glimpse the truth that the self you cling to has always been a crowd. Imagine a person. They walk, they talk, they smile, they cry, they react to music, they hold conversations, they say things like, I love you and I'm scared and I understand. But inside, there is nothing, no inner world, no consciousness, no awareness, just process. This is the philosophical zombie, an exact copy of a human in every observable way, but hollow. The lights are on, but no one is home. And if such a creature is possible, even in theory, then consciousness is not a necessary part of behavior. You do not need to feel in order to act. And that changes everything, because if your twin can do everything you do without experience, without a self, then what exactly is your self doing? Philosopher David Chalmers used this argument to challenge physicalism, the idea that everything about the mind can be explained by the brain. The zombie doesn't violate physics. It's built from atoms. It eats, it breathes, it falls in love, or seems to. But nothing is felt. It functions without freedom, reacts without meaning. And in that silence a question blooms. How do you know you're not one? You feel. Of course you feel, but that feeling can't be seen. It can't be measured. It can't be proved, only assumed. From the outside, consciousness is invisible, so perhaps it isn't needed. Perhaps you are a machine with dreams, stitched on afterward, like decals on a mirror, or maybe the dreams are real, but they don't steer the machine. They watch, they narrate, they reflect. But the gears turn on their own. You reach for a glass of water, you say hello, you blink. The actions happen, and then your awareness arrives, like a ghost echoing footsteps it never made. The zombie shows us how fragile the link is between behavior and being, and in doing so it whispers something cold, that the feeling of choosing might not be the same as choosing. That consciousness is not the pilot, only the passenger, looking out the window of a body it cannot steer, believing always that it is driving. A train is speeding down the track. Ahead, 5 people are tied to the rails. You stand beside a lever. If you pull it, the train diverts, killing one person on a side track instead. You pull it. This is the trolley problem. Simple, brutal, famous. Now imagine the same dilemma, but from within. Not as a thought experiment, but as an instinct. Because when psychologists studied real-time responses to these kinds of problems, they found something strange. Your decision may not come from reason. It may come from wiring. Pulling the lever, most people say yes. Pushing someone off a bridge to stop the train, most people say no. Same outcome, different method, and the brain reacts differently. Moral judgments aren't consistent. They flicker with context, with emotion, with proximity, with framing. It turns out you are not a moral philosopher. You are a reflexive system of evolved heuristics, a web of reactions dressed up as ethics, and this is what we call moral automatism. The sense that you're choosing the good when you're really responding to patterns. Neurologist Joshua Green scanned brains during trolley scenarios. He found logic lit up for impersonal decisions. Emotion took over when things got intimate. 2 systems. 1 illusion, that you are deliberating, that you are in control. But maybe morality is less a compass and more a script, written by evolution, tuned by survival, reinforced by culture. You believe in right and wrong because it kept your ancestors alive, not because it's true. And when faced with hard choices, your reasoning arrives late. Just like with Libet's experiment, you act, then explain. I did this because what? Because of childhood. Hormones, facial expressions, a smell, a tone, the lever is pulled, or not. The choice is made, or avoided, and your brain fills in the story after the act. You were not the author, you were the actor, such in playing a part you didn't audition for, on a stage you didn't build, believing all the while that the words were your own. Close your eyes, wait for a thought, any thought. Now ask yourself, where did it come from? You didn't choose it, you didn't design it, it just appeared. This is the heart of Sam Harris's argument against free will. The idea that thoughts, intentions, and choices arise in consciousness, unbidden. They come like weather. You can't predict your next thought. You can't stop it from arriving. You can only observe, and that means you are not the source. You are the field, the space in which ideas occur. Harris argues that everything you do is the result of prior causes, genetics, environment, memories, neural activity you do not see or control. You didn't choose your parents, you didn't choose your brain, you didn't choose your childhood, or your traumas, or your language. You didn't choose the molecules that form your mood. And from that foundation, your life unfolds, each step shaped by the one before, like dominoes, like a script too vast to read. The self you identify with is just along for the ride. And here's the part that stings. Knowing this changes nothing. You still love, you still grieve, you still reach out, but the belief in authorship, the belief that you are the final cause, that belief begins to dissolve. And in its place, stillness, chipped to the realization that what you are is happening, not doing, not choosing, just unfolding. A movie being played, not watched, not made, just seen. If determinism is true, then every action you take is the consequence of things that happened long before you were born. The shape of galaxies, the decay of stars, the evolution of apes. The moment your parents met, the consequence argument, sharpened by philosopher Peter van Inwagen, cuts through the question of freedom with surgical clarity. If your actions are determined by the laws of nature and events in the distant past, and if you cannot change those laws, and if you cannot change that past, then you cannot change your actions. You are not responsible for what was, and what was decides what is. So how can you be responsible for what is? That is the structure of the argument. Clean, cold, devastating. It says that if determinism is true, then free will is not, and if free will is not, then moral responsibility may be a lie. You are not guilty, you are not virtuous, you are a result. A flame sparked by winds you didn't feel, and yet you burn. Some try to resist this. They say that freedom means acting in accordance with your desires, that you are free if no one stops you. But what if the desire itself is not yours? What if the wanting was also caused? Then even your passion is a puppet, and your will is a mirror, reflecting causes, not commanding them. The consequence argument asks nothing more than this: can you change the laws of physics? Can you rewrite the past? If not, then what does it mean to say you could have done otherwise? And if you never could have done otherwise, then maybe you never chose at all. It sounds simple. You are only morally responsible for what you do if you could have done something else. This is the principle of alternate possibilities, and at first it feels obvious. How can someone be blamed for what they were forced to do? How can credit be given for what could not have been avoided? But in 1969, philosopher Harry Frankfurt proposed something strange. A thought experiment. Imagine a man named Jones. He's about to make a decision. Unbeknownst to him, a watcher waits in the background. If Jones decides to act wrongly, the watcher will intervene, manipulate his brain, ensure the action. But if Jones chooses wrongly on his own, the watcher does nothing. Jones acts. He chooses the wrong path, and the watcher never steps in. So Jones could not have done otherwise, but he still chose freely. Or did he? Frankfurt's argument challenges the principle. It suggests that the ability to do otherwise might not be required for moral responsibility, that it's enough if the person would have acted the same, even without interference. But this opens a deeper crack. If alternate possibilities are not required, then what is? If all your actions are inevitable, but you still feel like you're choosing, then what does freedom mean? The idea collapses inward. You choose what you were always going to choose. You follow the script you didn't write, and whether or not other options existed becomes irrelevant, because in the end you only walked one path, and the rest, they were only shadows. Fading possibilities, never real, only echoes of the freedom you thought you had, but never touched. A man walks into a room. He has a decision to make, and somewhere behind the scenes, someone is watching, waiting, ready. This is the structure of a Frankfurt case, a type of thought experiment designed to test the limits of free will and moral responsibility. Imagine the man, let's call him Black, wants a certain outcome. He implants a device into another person, Jones. If Jones chooses what Black wants, Black does nothing. But if Jones wavers, the device activates. It pushes him, forces the choice. But here's the twist. Jones chooses the outcome freely. No intervention needed. The device stays quiet. Black never acts. So Jones does what he was always going to do, but could not have done otherwise. And yet, he seems responsible. No coercion, no manipulation, just inevitability that never interferes. Frankfurt's argument is simple and strange. He claims that alternate possibilities aren't required for freedom, that moral responsibility can survive even when the path was fixed. It is a direct attack on the idea that freedom means options, that to be responsible, we must have been able to do something else. But in this case, Jones couldn't. And still, he chose, or thought he did. So the question emerges, does freedom come from what we could have done, or only from what we actually did? And if we strip away the could, what's left? A single path, one motion. The feeling of choice, without its substance, like a puppet that lifts its hand, unaware of the strings that would have pulled it if it hadn't moved on its own. You think you're free, because no one stopped you. But what if they didn't need to? What if the system was in place, and simply never fired? You still walked the path, but not alone, not entirely. A hidden hand hovered behind you, silent, dormant, but always ready. And so what felt like choice might have been permission, granted not by you, but by a world that didn't need to intervene, because you obeyed it before it had to act. The Frankfurt case doesn't say you're not responsible. It says responsibility might not need freedom at all, just compliance. And the illusion that you could have done otherwise, when in fact you never could. But you never knew. There is a future waiting, written not in ink but in structure, in form. In consequence, you move through life like a needle tracing grooves in a record already pressed. This is fatalism, the belief that events are fixed, unchangeable, destined to happen exactly as they will. Not because of divine will or prophecy, but because of causality. Cause leads to effect. And once the chain begins, there is no room for deviation. You spill a glass of water, the glass fell because your arm moved. Your arm moved because your brain fired. Your brain fired because of chemical signals. Those signals arose from past experiences, genetics, hormones, time of day, the weather. Trace the line far enough, and your life becomes a sculpture carved by time. So where is your freedom? If your choices are the end result of forces you did not create, can they still be yours? Imagine a universe where everything that happens is the only thing that could have happened. You wake, you eat, you speak, you think. But not from a menu of possibilities, from a single thread woven long ago. You think you choose, but what you really do is discover. Like a reader turning pages in a book they didn't write. You believe in detours, but the road only bends in ways it was always going to. And still, you hope your will matters. That you are not a domino, that you are not a wind-up machine. But maybe your will is just a name for a point in the chain. A node where the past meets the future, pretending to be in control. Fatalism does not mean nothing matters. It means everything follows. Like stars collapsing, like tides rising, like breath leaving the lungs. You are not outside of it. You are inside the flow. And even your belief in freedom is just another consequence. You walk a little slower after reading the word elderly. You're more polite after seeing the word respect. You vote differently if a flag is in the room. You don't notice, but your behavior shifts. This is behavioral priming. The quiet manipulation of choice through suggestion so subtle it feels like your own idea. In these experiments, participants are given tasks, word puzzles, sentence completions, simple activities, but the words are not random. They are loaded, tilted, primed. And after exposure, something changes. A person walks more slowly, becomes more cooperative, more hostile, more generous, not because they chose to, because they were guided, without knowing. It's not mind control, It's atmosphere, influence, suggestion, framing, like scent in a bakery, like lighting in a store. And here's the question: if your behavior can be shaped by things you don't notice, do you really choose it, or are you just reacting? A machine calibrated by the world around you, a mirror angled by experience. Some dismiss these experiments as fragile, difficult to replicate, but the idea remains that your mind is not sealed. It is porous, it absorbs, it abrocs, it adjusts, and the self floats downstream. Priming shows how much can happen before you decide, how often you act before you understand, and how the world enters you without knocking. You are not a fortress of agency, you are an echo chamber. Responding to whispers you mistake for your own voice, and the choices you think are yours may have arrived long before you noticed. What does it mean to will something? To want, to decide, to act? In the lab, this question takes shape in wires and waves. Researchers place people in scanners, ask them to move a finger, a toe, to press a button when it feels right, and the brain speaks first before the subject is aware. Before the moment of intention, the motor cortex begins to stir, the readiness potential begins to climb. The decision is already in motion. Before the mind reports it, you are not the origin of your action. You are the narrator. A voice describing the wave as it breaks too late to steer it, willing it seems, is not a command. It is a registration. The conscious mind catching up to what the unconscious already began. And so, the self is out of sync, delayed, watching the play from backstage, convinced it's the director. But the show goes on, with or without it. Some argue the timing is misunderstood, that awareness is hard to measure, that readiness is not intention, but the pattern repeats. The deeper we peer into the brain, the more we see processes without a watcher, choices without a chooser, motion without a mover, and that cuts deep, because it means that what you call freedom may be lag, that willing is not the spark, but the shadow, and the self is not the cause, only the witness, arriving late to a party it thinks it planned. A patient lies still. Electrodes touch the surface of the brain, a tiny current flows, and the hand lifts. The patient says, "I didn't move it." Or worse, the patient says, "I chose to, even though they didn't." The command came from outside, but the feeling of will remained. This is the strange world of electrical stimulation and agency, where scientists send signals into motor regions and watch the body respond. But more disturbingly, they stimulate areas tied to decision, intention, desire, and the person believes the action was theirs. Even though it wasn't, the implication is staggering. If we can fake a will, if we can produce the sensation of choosing from pure electricity, then how do we know any will is real? You raise your hand, you open a door, you speak, but how do you know that you chose it? Maybe your brain decided, maybe the world did. Maybe a current passed through, shaped by light, or memory, or chemistry, and your mind caught up afterward. Invented a reason, believed it was control, believed it was freedom. But what if agency is not about cause? What if it's about story, a narrative stitched around an act, to preserve the self, to keep the illusion whole? Stimulation shows how easily that illusion can be hacked, how fragile the sense of ownership is, how quickly the self agrees with what the body does, even when the self had no part in it. So what is free will, if it can be created with a wire? Maybe it's not a truth, maybe it's a feeling, and maybe that feeling can lie. You are not the source of your actions, you are the author of their meaning, and sometimes the meaning is a fiction. But the story must be told, because silence is too much. The world seems solid, immediate, filled with sensation that flows into you like rain onto open skin. But what if it's the other way around? What if you don't receive the world? What if you predict it? The predictive processing model says the brain is not a passive receiver, it is a forecaster, a sculptor of guesses, a machine that builds the world before it sees it. Your mind creates a model, a story of what should happen next, what you should hear, what you should see, what you should feel. And then, it checks. Reality is not experienced, it is compared. When the world meets your expectations, your brain hums in silence. When it doesn't, there's a jolt, a surprise, a signal to adjust the model. You think you see with your eyes, but much of what you see is drawn from within. You think you feel your body, but that feeling is predicted too. Even your own thoughts may arrive pre-shaped. And if the brain is always guessing, then what is a decision? A choice is not made. It is predicted. Before it arises, before you're aware, the brain expects you to choose, and so you do. You follow the path it already paved. A prediction fulfilled, not created. The self becomes a simulation, an echo of a system keeping itself running. And the freedom you feel is a confidence score, a high probability assigned to your next move. You are not the agent, you are the update. The world is not out there, waiting to be seen. It is built inside you, moment by moment, based on what the brain believes should be true. You are not reacting to the world, you are correcting errors, adjusting your model, drifting through a dream shaped by belief, stitched together from memory, sensation, and forecast. And in that loop, where is the will? If your action comes from expectation, not creation, then what is there to choose? You are not steering, you are aligning, matching your movements to a script you didn't write. And the script is always one step ahead. An apple falls from a tree. It lands exactly where it must, with a sound soft as inevitability. This is the world of classical physics, a world governed by laws so precise they feel like fate. Newton's universe is one of motion and force, of cause and effect. A great machine turning in silence, every gear locked in place. If you know the state of every object, every particle, every force, then you can predict the future, not in metaphor. In math, the world becomes a computation, a vast equation, unfolding moment by moment according to laws that never break. This is determinism, the idea that the future is fixed, not by chance, not by choice, but by the state of things now. You think you move freely, but in this model, you are a billiard ball, struck by forces invisible and ancient. You eat when you're hungry, but the hunger was caused. You speak, but the words were sculpted long before your mouth opened. Your heart beats, your hand reaches, your mind decides, but only because it must, only because it was always going to. In this view, free will is like a shadow that dances on the wall, but cannot change the shape of the flame. It looks alive, but it follows. And the laws do not ask permission. They do not consult the self. They guide the planets and your fingers the same way, with quiet certainty. In Newton's world, you are not outside the system. You are the system, and the choices you feel yourself making are just what the system was always going to do. The apple falls, the hand rises, the will appears, but behind it all, only motion, only the gentle weight of what cannot be otherwise. Down at the smallest scale, the universe trembles, particles blink in and out of place, positions blur, paths split, certainty vanishes. This is quantum mechanics, and it breaks the clean lines of classical physics. Here determinism gives way to probability. You cannot know both the position and momentum of a particle. You cannot say what path it will take, only what might happen, only the odds, and for some this offers hope. If the world is not strictly determined, then maybe choice lives in the cracks, maybe freedom is born from randomness. But randomness is not agency. A dice roll is unpredictable, but it is not free. A particle that moves without cause is not making a choice, it is behaving according to rules, rules of uncertainty, rules of distribution, rules of chance. So where does that leave you? If your decisions are not determined, but not directed, then what are they? Neither fate, nor freedom, just noise. Quantum mechanics opens the door to indeterminacy, but not control. You may not be trapped in a machine, but you are still not the one driving. The wheel spins, not by your hand, but by probability. And even if you survive the randomness, you didn't choose that either. It just happened to happen. Quantum freedom is not a gift, it is a void, and when you reach into it, nothing reaches back. Light moves like a wave until you watch it. Then it becomes a particle. In the double-slit experiment, photons are fired through two openings. When no one watches, they interfere, like ripples, like possibility. But when observed, they collapse, like marbles, like decisions. Now imagine something stranger. Imagine choosing to observe after the photon has already passed through the slits, and still the outcome changes. As if the choice in the future rewrote the past. This is the delayed choice quantum eraser, a setup where entangled particles are sent along separate paths. One hits a detector, the other is either measured or not. But that measurement doesn't just affect the future, it seems to retroactively determine what the first photon did. Did it go through one slit, or both? That depends on something that happens after. Time shudders, cause becomes consequence, and the arrow of choice bends. So what does this mean for free will? If the act of observation changes not just what is, but what was, then what are we choosing? And when you decide to look, and in that moment, the past is rewritten. But was the decision yours, or did it arise from a system that includes its own history? Maybe there is no before and after, only entanglement, only loops. You think the moment of choice is sharp, but it is smeared across time. And the photon, like you, never truly chose a path. It was both. Until the story demanded one, and even then, the story was already written. You just hadn't read that page yet. You feel like a continuous being, a single thread, unbroken, flowing from moment to moment. But what if you are not a stream? What if you are a strobe? Some neuroscientists believe consciousness is not continuous, but discrete. Not a movie, a slideshow. The brain samples the world in frames, tiny windows, milliseconds long, and between those windows, nothing. No awareness, no self, just dark. Time-sliced consciousness says the mind flickers, that the you who wakes is not the same as the you who eats, or blinks, or speaks. Each moment, a new construction. Each interval, a disappearance. You are assembled, again and again. A rhythm of light and silence. And the choices you think you make, they happen inside one of these frames. But which one? If consciousness comes in pulses, then maybe decisions do too. Not flowing, firing, not free, but sequenced, predicted, processed, passed along. The sense of continuity is a story told between the beats, a hallucination of persistence, and in that illusion, will is born. You think you decide, but you only exist at intervals, and each time, the world is already in motion, already nudging, already unfolding. You do not choose what happens in the next frame. You only wake to find it has happened, again, and again, and again. You are offered a choice, enter the machine, or stay in the world. The machine is perfect. Once inside, it creates experiences indistinguishable from reality. Joy, love, success, meaning whatever you desire, it will provide every detail flawless, every sensation real, at least to you. But none of it happens. No one you love is truly there. No effort you make is genuine. No risk, no uncertainty, no pain, only simulated bliss. So, would you plug in? Philosopher Robert Nozick believed most people would say no, not because the machine is flawed, but because something deeper matters. Autonomy, the ability to shape a life, to act, even if that act leads to failure, to choose, even when the outcome is unknown. The machine takes that away. It gives pleasure, but not authorship. And so we hesitate, because we sense somehow that experience alone is not enough. We want to be the ones who walk the path, not just dream it, but the machine poses a deeper question. What if you already are inside it? Your choices feel real, but are they? Your life unfolds. But who is steering? If your brain can be tricked, If experience can be simulated, then how do you know this is not just another version of the machine? And even if it's real, what if the choices you make are just responses to stimuli, to patterns, to scripts? Then autonomy was never yours. It was always a story. You believed you had control, that your life was self-authored. But maybe you are no more autonomous than the one plugged in, just another system, running the program. So you stand outside the machine, refuse the fantasy. But inside or out, what if it makes no difference? What if you're still not free, just choosing? Because that's what the system expected you to do. Because that's what someone like you would choose. Not because you could have chosen anything else. And so autonomy becomes a dream. One layer deeper than pleasure. Still an illusion. Still unreachable. You raise your hand. Later you say you meant to. You remember the thought, the urge, the intention. But when the moment happened, did you really choose it, or are you just explaining it after the fact? Some neuroscientists believe consciousness doesn't cause action. It narrates it. Like a commentator on a game already in progress, the body moves, the brain reacts, the choice unfolds, and then awareness arrives. Too late to steer, but just in time to tell the story. You believe you are the driver, but maybe you are the passenger, describing the turns. And the voice in your head is not issuing commands, but offering commentary. This is consciousness as post-hoc narration, not a command center, a news anchor. You decide what to eat, what to say, where to go, or so you think. But underneath, the decision was already forming, built from memory, shaped by mood, nudged by context. The conscious self watches and weaves it into meaning. I wanted this. I meant that. But maybe those sentences are just your mind catching up. Filling in blanks it cannot admit are empty. You are not lying. You are constructing. You are stitching order into chaos. Because silence is unbearable. A decision with no author is terrifying. So the self writes the script afterward and believes it always held the pen. But the handwriting doesn't match. The ink is still wet. The story is not yours. It just needs to be told. So the illusion can stay whole, and the mind can go on believing. It was there from the beginning. You feel like you're doing things. That thought leads to movement. That desire causes action. But what if that's an illusion? Epiphenomenalism is the idea that consciousness is a byproduct, a glow. The flame flickers, but it does not burn. Your thoughts arise alongside action, but they do not cause it. They are shadows on the wall of the mind. Beautiful, mysterious, but powerless. Imagine steam rising from a train engine. The steam is real, but it doesn't drive the train. It just appears when the engine moves. In the same way, your awareness may appear when your brain acts, not to control it, but to decorate it. You feel like you willed your hand to move, but the movement was already in motion. You feel like you chose the words you said, but the sentence began before the self noticed. The feeling of authorship is part of the show, not the script. And in this view, the self becomes an ornament, a ribbon tied to a machine that runs on its own. This doesn't mean you don't feel things. It means feeling doesn't change the flow. It just rides it. You think your sorrow shapes your tears, but maybe the tears come first, and the sorrow follows. You think your joy makes you laugh, but maybe the laughter was already rising, and consciousness just lit up to watch. The illusion is deep. You still feel like a cause, but epiphenomenalism whispers, you are the echo, not the voice. You lie to yourself, not out of malice, not even on purpose. You lie to yourself to keep going, to stay coherent, to survive. And the strangest part, you don't even know you're doing it. Recursive self-deception is the mind tricking itself about its own trickery. A loop, a system designed to hide its own operations from itself. You suppress a memory, rationalize a decision, reframe an event, and then forget you did it. The self rewrites its history, alters its logic, and believes the edit was always the truth. You chose that job because it was practical, Not because you were afraid, you left that relationship because it was time. Not because you were lonely, you hold beliefs for noble reasons, not because they comfort you. And maybe you do, but maybe not. Maybe your reasons are stories built on scaffolding you're not allowed to see. Because to see it would break the structure. And so you don't. You can't. The deception must be protected by more deception. You are not dishonest. You are recursive. You are a hall of mirrors, each reflection believing it is the original. And in that labyrinth, what is choice? If you don't know your own reasons, can you claim they're yours? You act. You justify. You believe. And none of it may be true, but all of it feels real. That's the point. The mind deceives itself so convincingly that it becomes the truth. And you live inside it, choosing, believing, remembering, not as a self, but as a story that keeps writing itself while hiding the pen. You decide to go for a walk. Later you say it was to clear your head, to stretch, to think, but the truth, you're not sure. This is the idea of conscious will as cognitive confabulation. The mind invents reasons for actions that were already in motion, like a child explaining why they drew a line after the line was drawn. The explanation feels real, feels honest, but it is fiction, not to deceive others. To protect the self, the brain must believe in its own agency. And so it writes stories of intent, of logic, of causation. It says, I meant to, even when it didn't. Studies show people will take credit for movements they didn't initiate, will defend decisions they didn't make. The confabulation is seamless, it happens instantly, and the illusion of choice remains untouched. You walk because you were restless, or maybe because a sound triggered a memory, or maybe because your glucose dipped and your body moved to stabilize itself. Whatever the cause, you moved, and your mind followed. Not to lead, to narrate. The self is not the spark, it is the story. A retrospective explanation layered over behavior, a beautiful lie we cannot live without. Because if our choices are not ours, what are we? If we are not the cause, what remains? Just awareness, just observation, just a voice saying, I did this, after the act is already done. You think of yourself as one mind, one voice, one center, but what if that's not true? What if the mind is modular, a collection of competing systems, each with its own purpose, its own logic, its own voice? The modular mind hypothesis suggests the self is not unified. It is fragmented, distributed, layered like a city built on top of itself. There are modules for language, for movement, for perception, for hunger, for fear, for faces, for pain. Some speak loudly, others whisper. Many operate in silence. They do not consult one another. They do not vote. They jostle. They interrupt. They override. And somehow, out of this chaos, you emerge, or seem to. When you make a decision, it may not be a choice. It may be the outcome of a struggle between modules. One says yes. One says no. One recalls a memory. One flinches from danger. And the result is the action that wins. You call it will, but it may be momentum, the product of forces you do not feel. Your hunger module wants food. Your social module fears judgment. Your memory module pulls from childhood, and you move. Not because a self decided, because the system resolved. And after you feel it was you, but which part? Which module spoke for you? Which one whispered just loud enough to be heard? The modular mind reveals the illusion of unity. You are not a commander. You are a colony, a crowd of instincts and patterns, and what you call choice is the moment the dust settles. The brain is not a straight line. It is loops, circuits that feed back into themselves, signals that return, echo, refine. This is not a machine that moves from input to output. It is a storm, a swirl. Each thought, not a point, but a pattern. Each action, not a command, but a convergence. Recurrent neural networks within the brain allow past states to influence present ones. The decision you make now is colored by the one before, not in memory, In architecture, the loop tightens, expectation shapes perception. Perception shapes response, response shapes future expectation, and around it goes. So where is the moment of choice? Where does the loop break? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe what feels like a decision is just a stabilization. The neural storm settles briefly into a path, then continues. You chose tea instead of coffee, but that choice was not a fork. It was a resonance. The network settled into one attractor state, not because you willed it, because that was where the loop led. Like water spiraling down a drain, not because it wanted to, but because that's where the shape of the pipe directed it. You are not outside the loop, you are inside it, and the thought you have now was already being formed by the loop that came before. You have a thought. The thought says, raise your hand. You raise it. Simple, obvious, cause and effect. But philosophers ask, did the thought cause the action, or did both emerge from something deeper? This is the problem of mental causation. How do mental states, beliefs, desires, intentions cause anything at all? The brain is physical, electrochemical, measurable. The mind is not. So how can a non-physical thing move a physical one? Some say the mind is just another way of describing the brain, that the thought didn't cause the movement. The brain caused both. Others say mental states are real, but powerless, like a shadow following a dancer, always moving, never moving anything. You feel your will driving the body, but maybe the body was already moving, and the will was just tagging along. There is no clear answer, only more layers. Does consciousness cause change, or does it reflect it? If your decision to speak arises from neurons firing milliseconds before awareness, then what does the decision mean? Not a cause, not an origin, just a flame flickering in the wake of action. And so the mind floats, present, aware, profound, but untethered, watching a world it cannot touch, and still, it believes. You act, and then you explain. But what if the explanation is a mirage? What if the intention was added after? This is the illusion of retrospective intention. The mind tells a story about what just happened, a story of purpose, of choice. But the story is fiction, not because you lie, but because you must believe. The world is too chaotic, too fast, so the brain fills in the blanks. You say, I meant to turn left, but perhaps your body turned before your mind decided. You say, I wanted to speak, but maybe the words came first. The narrative arrives quickly, seamlessly. You don't notice the delay, you don't question the memory, but the timing is wrong. The story is stitched over the moment, to give it meaning, to give it shape, but the shape is backwards. You are the reader, not the writer. You remember intention, because without it, there is only randomness, and that cannot be endured. So the mind rewinds, recolors, and paints the illusion. You think the story began with will, but it ends there, written after the action, pretending it came first. From simple rules, complexity blooms. Birds flock, markets shift, ants build cities. No single agent understands the whole, yet the whole arises. This is emergence, and the mind may be emergent too. Billions of neurons, firing, rewiring, dancing. No single one knows who you are, but together, they produce a self, or the feeling of one. Emergentism suggests that consciousness is not found in the parts. It arises from the whole, like heat from motion, like meaning from words. You are not in any one cell, you are in the pattern. But this raises a question. If the self is emergent, what does it control? You can't point to a single neuron that is you. So how do you direct them? Can an emergent property turn and guide its parts? Can the wave move the ocean? Some say yes, that once a system reaches a certain complexity, new rules take hold. That the self, though built from matter, gains leverage over matter. But others say no, that emergence is descriptive, not causal, that the self exists only as a summary, not as a source. You feel like you steer, but maybe the system steers itself, and the self is what appears when the system says it must. like color emerging from light, like life emerging from molecules. Not magic, just motion. You are the motion, not the mover, and control is the story the motion tells itself. You see someone smile, and without thinking, you smile too. You watch a hand reach for a glass, and your brain fires as if you reach for it yourself. This is the mirror system. Neurons that reflect action, that light up when you move and when you see someone else move. It's not imitation, it's resonance, a dance of empathy that begins before awareness. And through this mirroring, something deeper emerges. Desire, not from within, from without. René Girard called it mimetic will. The idea that we want what others want, not because we chose to, but because desire spreads like flame, contagious, unbidden. You see someone long for a thing, and suddenly it shines brighter, not because of the thing, because of the wanting. Your will becomes a reflection. You believe your choices come from inside you, but maybe they came from the outside, passed from person to person like a signal, a glance, a gesture. Desire is not a compass, it's a current. You want the job, the house, the life, because others do. You feel it's yours, but it arrived like pollen, unnoticed, and now it blooms. Mirror neurons do more than mimic movement, they echo intention. They suggest that your will is not sealed inside your skull. It leaks, it absorbs, it mirrors. You are not an origin, you are a reflection. A chorus of copied urges, layered so deeply they feel original. But every note you hum was sung by someone else, long before, and you don't remember learning the tune. Only that it feels like your own voice, even as it echoes someone else's longing. The world flows into you, sight, sound, smell, touch, but not as it is, as expected. The brain does not wait for sensation. It predicts it. This is the predictive mind. Your brain models the world before the world arrives. It guesses, it forecasts, it prepares. And then, when input comes, it compares. The difference between what was expected and what occurred is called prediction error. And your brain hates it, so it adjusts, either by updating the model or by changing your behavior to make the world match the model. This is where control dissolves. Because if your actions serve prediction, then they are not free, they are corrections. You don't move to explore, you move to resolve errors. You act not from intention, but to bring the world back in line with what the brain believes should be true. And those beliefs, they are shaped by past experience, by repetition, by memory. The past casts a shadow onto the future, and you walk within it. So your choices are not fresh. They are echoes of old predictions. When you reach for the door, when you speak a name, when you pull away from pain, the model came first, the mind expected it, and you moved to fulfill it. Like a marionette dancing not to a tune but to a forecast. Even rebellion is expected. Even novelty is absorbed. The predictive mind anticipates your resistance and accounts for it. So when you feel most free, maybe that's when you're most in sync. Most aligned with the model, most determined. The prediction fits the world, and the world fits you, but only because you were shaped to fit it. Close your eyes. Where are you? You imagine a center, a soul behind the eyes. A self that chooses, that observes, that approves, that remains. But when you search for it, nothing stays. Thoughts drift, feelings fade, the center slips. The idea of a true self is persistent. It comforts, it anchors, but it may not be real. The self might be a myth, a useful story, constructed after the fact. Like the frame built around a mirror, you are not a single thing. You are layers, sensations, memories, habits, fears, hopes, each one claiming to be you, each one changing. You speak with one voice, but the voice is made of fragments. And yet you believe in the pilot, the driver, the inner chooser. But when scientists look, they don't find it. No homunculus, no seat of the soul, just processes, just patterns. The brain speaks to itself, and one part listens, and that listener is what you call me. But it is not fixed, it is not central, it is not in control. The self is an illusion so convincing. Even the illusion doesn't know it's fake. It looks backward and says, I chose this, but it did not choose. It observed, it interpreted, it justified, like a shadow claiming to cast itself, and yet the illusion persists, not because it's true, but because it is necessary. Without the myth of the self, there is no one to suffer, no one to act, no one to remember, and so we believe, even when the mirror is empty. You are not a blank slate, you are a gambler. Every moment, every thought, every feeling is a bet. Your brain is Bayesian, a statistical machine, constantly updating beliefs based on new evidence. You begin with priors, expectations, probabilities drawn from experience. And then the world offers data, a sound, a smell, a glance, and your brain adjusts. It updates its beliefs. It refines its model. This is not a conscious process. It is automatic, relentless, and your behavior is shaped by it. You think you are reasoning, choosing, deliberating, but you are calculating. You believe it's intuition, but it's statistics. You cross the street, not because you feel safe, but because the odds said it was likely enough. You speak a word, not because it feels right, but because your model predicted it would fit. And the deeper truth is this: the brain doesn't seek truth, it seeks to minimize surprise, to align the world with its model, and to align its model with the world. You are a prediction engine, a walking hypothesis, and your life is a series of updates, tiny corrections, incremental shifts. Even your identity is Bayesian. Who you are is just the most probable version of yourself, given your past and your present, and freedom. Freedom may be the name you give to a high-confidence prediction. It feels right, so you do it. But the feeling is the result of data, not will. You are not the scientist. You are the experiment, and the experiment never ends. There is a stone on the ground. You kick it. It moves. You do not ask what it felt, because stones do not feel, or do they? Panpsychism is the idea that consciousness is fundamental, that all matter has some form of experience, not intelligence, not agency, just the faintest spark of awareness, not in the brain, in everything, in particles, in light, in motion. And if this is true, then you are not special, you are not a miracle, you are a complex pattern of simple experiences woven together, and the self, the agent. That might be the greatest illusion of all. Agency feels real. You act.
You choose. You move.
But maybe that's just what it feels like to be a very organized system of awareness, like a whirlpool in a stream, thinking it steers the water. You are not the author. You are the pattern. And the feeling of agency is part of that pattern. A side effect. A sensation, not a power. Panpsychism doesn't remove consciousness. It dissolves the ego. It says the world is full of tiny minds, flickering silently. And what you call a self is just a structure, a complex swirl, an eddy in the current. No more responsible for its direction than the stream is for the slope of the earth. You are awareness, but awareness is everywhere. And agency is just what awareness feels like when it forgets it is not alone. You commit an act, maybe cruel, maybe kind. You reflect and say, I chose to do it. I'm responsible. But philosopher Dirk Pereboom invites you to question that, to peel back the surface of the self and see what lies underneath. Hard incompatibilism is the view that whether determinism is true or false, free will still doesn't survive. If everything is determined, you're not free. But if everything isn't determined, if actions emerge from randomness, then you're still not free, because randomness is not control. Either way, responsibility vanishes. You are not the first link in the chain. You are a node, a product of causes stretching back before your birth, before memory, before thought. Your genes, your upbringing, your culture, your chemistry, all pushing, all pulling, and you reacting, but not choosing. Even your sense of guilt, of pride, of purpose, it too was shaped, not selected. Paraboom says this does not make you a monster, it makes you human. It invites compassion. If no one ultimately controls their actions, then blame becomes softer. Punishment becomes prevention, not retribution. Morality becomes guidance, not judgment. You still care, you still act, you still live. But you do not stand apart from cause. You are not exempt. The will is not sovereign. It is part of the system. And the self you claim to be is just the latest wave on an ancient ocean. So when you ask, could I have done otherwise? The answer is always no. And also, it doesn't matter. Because you never stood outside your life. You only moved through it. Exactly the way you were going to. The world is closed, not by law or design, by causality. Everything that happens in the physical world has a physical cause. This is the principle of causal closure. The idea that once physics is accounted for, nothing else is needed. No ghost, no soul, no mind beyond the neurons. If a muscle contracts, there is a reason. If a word is spoken, there is a chain. Every event in your body, your brain, your life has a physical antecedent. And if that's true, where does the mind fit? If physical events are fully explained by prior physical events, then there's no room for mental causation. Your thoughts might be along for the ride. They correlate, they coincide, but they do not steer. They are like shadows cast by moving gears. Beautiful, mysterious, but weightless. You feel like your intention caused the action, but the physical chain was already in motion, and the thought arrived as an echo, not a command. The brain is an engine. The mind is its heat. The two are bound but not equal. And causal closure makes a claim as cold as it is elegant. Everything happens for a reason, but the reason is never you, not the you that thinks, that chooses, that hopes. That you is an effect, not a cause. And so every movement, every word, every breath was going to happen, because the atoms required it, and the rest is story, spoken by a voice that always follows the body's lead, never the other way around. You follow a rule, you add to, you drive on the right, you shake hands when introduced, but philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein asked a strange question. What does it mean to follow a rule? Not once, but again and again. How do you know you're applying the rule correctly? You say, I remember what it means, but memory is vague. Interpretation is infinite. Each new application could veer. Each step might be a fork. And if following a rule requires another rule, then the process never ends. An infinite regress. So how do we ever follow anything? Wittgenstein's answer is quiet. We just do. We are trained. We act. We correct. And others agree. It is not logic. It is practice. Community. Context. Agreement. The rules don't float in the sky. They live in behavior. And in that, a new idea of autonomy takes shape. Not a will above the world. A self within it. You do not invent meaning. You inherit it. You embody it. Autonomy, then, is not pure freedom. It is skilled navigation. It is fluency in forms you didn't create. You don't build the game. You learn to play. And freedom is not escaping the rules. It is moving through them with grace, not because you are the origin, because you belong. And so, the self is not a sovereign chooser. It is a rule follower, but not blindly, with rhythm, with style. With the strange dignity of a dancer, tracing steps older than memory, yet never exactly the same. The debate begins with a split. Compatibilism says yes. Incompatibilism says no. Can free will and determinism coexist? Are we free even if everything is caused? Compatibilists say we are free if we act according to our desires, even if those desires were caused. Freedom is not the absence of causality. It is the absence of coercion. You're free if no one's forcing you, even if the universe is nudging you all the way. But incompatibilists aren't convinced. They ask, if my desire itself was shaped by the world, then how can I be responsible? It's not my choice to want what I want. It just appeared. I followed it, and if I couldn't have done otherwise, where is the freedom? Compatibilism draws a smaller circle, a freedom within the system, like a ball rolling downhill, freely, because no one pushed it off course. Incompatibilism draws a line outside the circle. True freedom, it says, means being unbound. But where would that unbinding begin? If not in the laws of physics, then in randomness. But randomness isn't will either. It's just noise. So the question circles endlessly. Is freedom a feeling, a legal fiction, a moral necessity, or is it a misunderstanding of what it means to act? Both sides stare into the same room. One sees a window, the other sees a wall. But neither can look away, because inside that room is the story we tell ourselves about who we are and why we do what we do. You want something, but why? Because of another want, and that one also rooted in another. Each desire leads to a deeper one. I want to read because I want to learn. I want to learn because I want to grow. I want to grow because I want to be fulfilled. But why that? Where does it end? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the chain of desire stretches infinitely downward, each link made of reasons you did not choose. You inherited them from biology, from childhood, from culture. Desires nested in desires, none of them truly yours. And if you cannot find the first want, the one untouched by another, can you say you ever chose at all? You think you act from reasons, but the reasons come from reasons. And those reasons, shadows. You can dig forever, but the bottom never comes. And so you float on layers of wanting, built on layers of need, built on layers of instinct, built on layers of time. Freedom feels like climbing, but maybe it's just falling through a tunnel of preference, shaped by everything that came before. And the desire to be free, itself, just another desire, another link in the chain. Another illusion of depth in a system that loops endlessly, never landing, only spiraling, beautifully, blindly, forever. Imagine a machine that knows you better than you know yourself. It watches what you do, tracks what you click, measures how long your eyes linger, records what you eat, when you sleep, who you speak to, and why. And from that, it begins to predict. At first, it's simple. You'll want coffee in the morning. You'll text your friend back after 12 minutes. You'll rewatch the movie you said you didn't love. Then it goes deeper. It knows what mood you'll be in tomorrow, which argument you'll avoid, what choice you'll make before you're even aware. A choice is coming. The model becomes refined. You are not a mystery. You are data, and the machine sees the shape of you. Every thought, every habit, every likely future, laid bare. If such an intelligence exists, hyper-rational and predictive, and it can anticipate your every move with perfect accuracy, what does that say about free will? If the machine always gets it right, does that mean your choices were never open, just inevitable? You say, I could have done otherwise, but it knew you wouldn't, not by magic, by math. And if it's always right, how can you claim to be the source? Perhaps free will isn't falsified by unpredictability, but it trembles under total prediction. The machine doesn't control you, but it reveals you, unmasks the illusion that you were ever steering, when really, you were always on rails, elegant, complex, but fixed, and the moment you act, the model nods, because it already saw you do it. You make a promise. Tomorrow you will rise early, you will eat clean, you will work hard, you will not indulge, but when the morning comes, you don't. This is the paradox of self-control. How can the same self give an order and then disobey? Who is in charge? Who is resisting? You think of yourself as one mind, one will, but moments like this reveal something else. Divided selves, one makes the plan, the other breaks it, one speaks with discipline. The other whispers with hunger. You say, I have no self-control. But what does that mean? That the self lost control of itself. It's a loop, a contradiction. If you were truly one, there'd be no need to resist, there'd be no gap between plan and action. But the gap is wide and filled with tension. Desire pulls against intention, impulse overrules strategy, and the self fragments. Philosophers and psychologists try to resolve it. Some say the true self is the one that plans, others say the true self is the one that acts. But maybe neither is right, maybe the self is not fixed, maybe it shifts. You are the planner in one moment, the indulger in the next, and the memory of both creates the illusion of continuity. But what if the will is not a single force? What if it's a battlefield, and what you call self-control is just the story you tell about the outcome? Not the cause, not the command, just the part of you that won. This time, you come to a crossroads. There are two paths ahead. You pause, you consider. You feel the choice emerging. The two-stage model of free will offers a framework. First, generation. Your mind produces options, not from nowhere, from memory, from context, from randomness. The possibilities arise. Second, selection. You choose among the options. Evaluate, decide, act. This model attempts to preserve freedom without denying cause. It says we are not entirely determined. There is space, a window where possibility blooms, a spark of randomness, but not chaos. Freedom, in this model, is not absolute. It is constrained. It exists within boundaries, but within them, there is play. The first stage is where chance lives. The second is where reason steps in. Together, they create something like will. But critics remain skeptical. If randomness plays a role, is that really freedom? If selection is guided by past experience, is that any different than determinism? The model tries to hold both truths. We are not fully caused. We are not fully free. We are a system, open to influence, closed to chaos, somewhere between dice and destiny. But still, the question lingers. When you choose the left path, was that choice yours, or just the highest-rated output of a process you never built? Perhaps the two-stage model doesn't solve the mystery, but it names it and leaves you standing at the fork, still wondering who is doing the walking. You watch a cat walk along a ledge. You say it knows not to fall. You look at a thermostat. You say it wants to keep the room warm. Neither is conscious, but both are predictable. This is the intentional stance, a term coined by philosopher Daniel Dennett. It's a strategy. When we want to understand behavior, we treat the system as if it has beliefs, goals, desires. Even if it doesn't, we say the chess computer wants to win. We say the bacteria is searching for food. We project agency because it works. It helps us navigate complexity. But here's the twist. What if that's all the self is? An as-if, a useful fiction. We act, and others explain us in terms of goals. We explain ourselves the same way, not because it's true, because it helps. It helps organize behavior, coordinate action, build systems. So we say, I wanted this, I meant that. But maybe those are not discoveries. Maybe they are strategies. The self, then, is not an essence. It is a stance taken by others and by ourselves, a shortcut, an interface, and free will. Just another frame. Useful, but not real. A lens that sharpens the image, even if the light bends. You sit inside a room. Chinese characters slide through a slot. You don't understand them, but you have a rule book. For every symbol, there's a response. You follow the rules. The symbols go out. To those outside, it seems like you understand Chinese, but inside, you know you don't. This is the Chinese room. A thought experiment by philosopher John Searle. It challenges the idea that syntax alone is sufficient for understanding. The room behaves as if it knows, but it doesn't know. There is no meaning, no comprehension, only manipulation. And here the question of intentionality appears. What does it mean to mean something? Can a system that behaves intelligently be said to understand? Searle says no, because meaning requires experience, a mind, a first-person perspective. But if that's true, what about you? Are you the room? Do your thoughts mean something? Or are they symbols processed by rules you never wrote? Your neurons fire, your body acts, your words form, but is there a knower, or just the appearance of knowledge? The room responds, but it does not understand. The machine calculates, but it does not choose. And maybe the self is the same, an illusion of comprehension, a system complex enough to fool itself, a room inside a room, passing notes, calling it freedom. You act, you reflect, you ask why. Christine Korsgaard says this reflection is the key. You are not just a creature that does, you are a creature that must justify what it does, to others, to yourself. Again and again, this is constitutive agency. You are not an agent because you choose. You are an agent because you must act for reasons. You cannot simply want. You must answer for your wanting, even to yourself in the quiet. Why did I do that? What does that say about who I am? You are bound to standards, not imposed by law or nature, but by identity. To be a self is to be someone who must act in ways they can endorse. You cannot step outside your own judgment. You must live with it, and this is where Korsgaard locates freedom. Not in escaping causality, but in taking ownership of reasons. You are not free to act however you want. You are free only if you can stand behind your action with a reason that holds. But even here, doubt creeps in. Where did the reason come from? Was it freely chosen, or formed by history, by biology, by patterns too deep to see? You endorse your action. But did you choose the part of you that endorsed it? You act for reasons, but the reasons arise on their own. So maybe constitutive agency is not a solution. Maybe it is a more intricate mask, one that hides the machinery behind a mirror of justification. Still, you look into it and say, I did this because, and believe it matters. Even if the echo came first. A man runs a red light. He's drunk, reckless, but the street is empty. No one is hurt. Another man does the same. But this time, a child crosses. There is a crash, a tragedy. One walks away ashamed, the other is condemned, but both chose the same action. So why is one judged more harshly? This is the problem of moral luck. You are held responsible for things you cannot control. Not just your choices, but the outcomes those choices collide with in war, in love, in life. A decision made in the dark may look noble or cruel, depending on what comes after. You try to act rightly, but the world responds unpredictably, and the same self in two timelines becomes a hero or a villain. Is that justice? Is that freedom? If morality depends on chance, can you truly be responsible? You say, I meant well, but intentions blur, results speak louder, and luck decides the volume. Even your character is shaped by luck, your temperament, your resilience, your empathy, none of it chosen, all of it judged. And yet the world demands answers, demands punishment, demands praise. So you carry the weight, even though the winds were not yours to command, even though the dice were already falling. Moral luck reveals a painful truth, that judgment may be blind to fairness, and freedom may not be enough. Because the world does not care why, only what happened. And what happened could have been different, even if you never could. A light beam splits. It travels two paths at once, one particle, two possibilities. Later you choose whether to observe which path it took, and somehow that choice seems to reach backward, altering the past. This is the delayed choice quantum eraser, and it opens the door to retro-causality. The idea that the future can affect the past, that a decision made now can influence events that already occurred. It sounds impossible, but quantum mechanics leaves room for it. Wave functions collapse in strange ways. Entangled particles mirror each other across space, and maybe across time. If the past is not fixed until observed, then what does that say about choice? If your decision now rewrites what was, then what was never truly was. And the past is not a cause. It is a canvas, waiting for the brushstroke, waiting for the present. So where is the line? If effects ripple backward, then you are not only the product of your past, you are the architect of it, but not consciously. Not with intent, just as a participant in a system that loops, a system that rewinds, where time is not a line, but a knot, and causation is not an arrow, but a web. In this world, freedom becomes slippery. If the future shapes the past, then what does it mean to choose? Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe the choice you make now is the reason you were always going to. You see a ball roll into another. The second ball moves. You say, the first caused the second, but why? Because it always happens that way. Because it makes sense. David Hume asked a deeper question. What do we actually see? We see sequence, we see contact, but we never see cause. Causation is not observed, it is inferred. We connect the dots because of habit, because of expectation, not because we see necessity. So what if causation isn't real? What if it's just the mind's way of stitching the world together? Then every chain you believe in becomes suspect. Action and consequence, effort and reward, choice and result. If causation is a projection, then so is control. You think your will causes action, but maybe that's just the story your mind tells. I thought, then I moved. But what if the movement came first? What if the thought was the echo, the illusion? Hume didn't say causation is false, he said it cannot be proven. And that doubt lingers. Even now, you act, you believe it matters, but you do not see the thread that connects. You only assume it, and that assumption is the scaffolding of freedom, held up by habit, not by truth. You're sitting in a room, surrounded by the hum of machinery, the soft flicker of lights. It feels real, doesn't it? The cool surface beneath your fingertips, the rhythmic pulse of your breath. But what if it isn't? What if everything around you, your thoughts, your sensations, were merely projections, a simulated reality? This is the crux of the simulation hypothesis, the idea that the world you experience isn't the base reality at all. It's a simulation created by some higher intelligence, a computer running an elaborate program that simulates everything you know, time, space, even consciousness itself. All of it, just data. Imagine then that everything you've ever experienced, the soft breeze, the sound of your heartbeat, the taste of your favorite food, has been carefully constructed, not by nature, but by code, algorithms, and artificial constructs. The trees you see outside, perhaps they don't exist at all, except as a digital recreation, created to be perceived by you. In this world, you might be nothing more than a set of instructions, a sequence of ones and zeros wrapped in a biological shell. You think you are you, but in truth, your identity is simply an illusion, crafted by a simulation that cannot truly be touched, only experienced through your senses. The real you is somewhere, outside the program, in a world you can never reach. Consider for a moment the possibility that every time you blink, every time you turn your head, you are simply re-rendering your perception of the world. Each moment, in this view, is not happening as you experience it, but is instead an instantaneous recreation of everything that ever was, created anew just for you. If we accept this idea, we're forced to ask, what is the nature of our consciousness? Are we aware of the truth of our own creation? Or are we so immersed in the simulation that we've lost all awareness of the world outside? Perhaps our minds are simply programmed to perceive what is necessary to navigate the world, to live, to survive. The most haunting aspect of the simulation hypothesis is its implications for free will. If everything is scripted, every action and thought predetermined by the system running the simulation, what room is there for choice? You may feel as if you are making decisions, but what if those decisions are only the result of a complex algorithm, a series of probabilities that converge upon the actions you take? And yet, there are cracks in the simulation. Perhaps the glitches are too subtle to notice during the day-to-day. A strange coincidence, a flickering of lights, the briefest moment of déjà vu, a sense that something is wrong, but not enough to prove it. Could these be signs that the simulation is failing, that the layers are thinning, and reality is about to expose itself? This possibility, unsettling as it may seem, has been gaining ground in both scientific and philosophical circles. If advanced civilizations can create simulations of their own, simulations that are indistinguishable from real life, then why shouldn't we ourselves be living in one? The idea is not purely theoretical. It's based on the potential for technology to reach a point where simulating consciousness becomes not just possible, but inevitable. The philosopher Nick Bostrom proposed a thought experiment, known as the simulation argument. It suggests that at least one of the following must be true. Civilizations either never reach a level of technological advancement that allows for such simulations, they choose not to create them, or we are indeed living in a simulation right now. The odds, it seems, are tilted toward the last option. But if we are in a simulation, who's the programmer? Who is running the code? Is it another civilization, observing us as we observe the world around us? Or is it something far more abstract, an unknown force, an algorithmic process that is beyond human comprehension? The creators of this world, if they even exist, are so far removed from us that we may never understand their intentions or even their existence. Now, imagine stepping outside the simulation. The world you once thought was real dissolves into a static void. The rules you've known, gravity, time, light, cease to matter. You're no longer bound by the constraints of space. In the real world, whatever that may be, everything is different. The program you've lived in for so long has been peeled away, leaving you face to face with something far more unfathomable. If the simulation is indeed the truth, then perhaps the most pressing question isn't about the nature of the world outside, but about the world within. What does it mean to live, to experience, to perceive, when everything you know is based on a simulation? Are we reduced to mere simulations ourselves, existing only for the purposes of the program, or do we transcend the system, finding meaning in the moments we are given? This, in essence, is the paradox at the heart of the simulation hypothesis. If we are in a simulation, can we ever truly know what's real? Is our sense of reality merely an illusion, a construct of something we cannot touch, grasp, or understand? Or is there something more to our existence, something beyond the program, that gives meaning to our experiences? If we continue down this path, it becomes clear that the lines between reality and illusion blur more with every question asked. Each answer leads to new layers of complexity, more mysteries, more paradoxes. The truth may lie just beyond our reach, like a shimmering horizon, always receding as we approach. Are we simply the product of an experiment, a glitch in a vast simulation? Or are we more than that, more than the sum of our code? In the end, we may never know, but the question itself, whether we're living in a simulation, reveals something even deeper about the nature of human curiosity, our desire to understand and define the boundaries of existence. And so, we remain, caught in this web of thoughts and questions, not knowing if the answers lie within or beyond the code we've been given. But we live, we experience, and that in itself may be the most important truth of all. You float in a dark, silent space. You feel nothing, hear nothing. Yet, you are aware of your thoughts, aware of the world around you, or at least, what you believe is the world around you. But what if it's all an illusion? What if your senses deceive you? This is the premise of the brain in a vat thought experiment. Imagine, if you will, that your brain is detached from your body, suspended in a vat of life-sustaining liquid. The brain is connected to a computer that stimulates your mind, providing you with sensory experiences, as if you were still walking through the world, interacting with others, living your life. In this scenario, everything you see, feel, taste, and hear is nothing more than a set of artificial signals. The people around you, the trees swaying in the breeze, the warmth of the sun, all of it is just data being transmitted to your brain. There is no physical world, no body to walk through it, only the illusion of it all. But how could you ever know? How could you tell if the world you perceive is real, or just a sophisticated simulation designed to trick you? Your senses tell you that the world is real. Your mind has no reason to doubt it. Yet, The very foundation of your experience is based on nothing but illusion, a creation of a machine far beyond your understanding. This idea, though unsettling, poses a question about the nature of reality itself. If all of your experiences, your entire existence, can be reduced to nothing but electrical signals, can we ever truly know what's real? Are our perceptions just projections, fabricated by some higher intelligence, a mind floating in a vat of life? And what of the self? If your brain is no longer housed within your body, does that mean you are still the same person? Is your identity bound to the physical world, or is it a product of your mind, your consciousness, your thoughts? If your mind is separated from its physical form, does it still retain the essence of you, or does the mind become something else entirely? The more you think about it, the more unsettling it becomes. If all you are is a brain in a vat, disconnected from the world you perceive, how can you trust anything? How can you trust your senses, your thoughts, your memories? What if the very act of trusting is part of the illusion, a mechanism of the mind designed to keep you grounded in a false reality? Yet, this paradox leads to an intriguing conclusion. If you are indeed a brain in a vat, then everything you experience still feels real to you. The sensations, the emotions, the thoughts, they are still yours. They may not be based in physical reality, but they are still real in the sense that they exist within your consciousness. And so perhaps, reality is not about external facts, but about perception, about the way the mind experiences the world. This brings us to a deeper question. What is truth? If our senses are unreliable, if they only provide us with a filtered, fabricated version of the world, then what is truth but a construct of our minds? What if truth is not something objective, something out there waiting to be discovered, but something subjective, something that depends on the way our minds interact with the world? In a way, the brain in a vat scenario challenges our understanding of knowledge itself. If all we can know is what our minds tell us, and if our minds are manipulated by an external force, how can we ever claim to know anything with certainty? Are we simply trapped within our own minds, unable to escape the illusions they create? Philosophers have long debated this very idea. Descartes, for example, proposed that the only thing we can be sure of is our own existence, cogito, ergo sum. But what if even that is a lie? What if our very thoughts are not our own, but part of a larger, more intricate illusion? The brain in a vat reminds us that certainty is fleeting, that even our most basic assumptions about reality may be flawed. And so we come to a curious point. If we cannot trust our senses, if we cannot trust our minds, what is left? How do we navigate a world where everything we perceive could be fabricated, where the lines between reality and illusion blur until they are indistinguishable? Perhaps the answer lies not in seeking certainty, but in accepting the mystery itself, in embracing the unknown. The mind, it seems, is a powerful thing. It can create entire worlds, entire realities, out of nothing. But this power also makes it vulnerable, susceptible to deception, to manipulation. The brain in a vat invites us to question the very nature of our existence, to challenge the assumption that what we perceive is the whole truth. It asks us to wonder if the world is not what it seems. What does that say about us? The idea is both profound and unsettling. If we are trapped in a vat, if our minds are held captive by some greater force, then what does freedom mean? Are we free to make choices, to shape our lives, if everything is controlled by an external force? Or is freedom itself just another illusion, a fleeting fantasy created to keep us content within the confines of the simulation? And yet, even if we are nothing more than brains in vats, does that make our experiences any less meaningful? After all, the feelings you have, the moments of joy, of pain, of love, they are real to you. They exist within the confines of your mind, and in that sense they are as real as anything else. The brain in a vat hypothesis reminds us that reality, at its core, is a matter of perception. What then is the purpose of this strange existence, if we cannot know the world as it truly is? If all we have are our perceptions, what meaning can we find? Perhaps meaning is not found in the world around us, but in the way we experience it, in the thoughts we have, the emotions we feel, the choices we make. Even in a simulated world, we can find purpose if only we look within. In the end, the brain in a vat thought experiment doesn't give us answers. It doesn't provide us with a neat, tidy solution. Instead, it forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge, the fragility of our perceptions. It reminds us that the truth may always remain just out of reach, and that perhaps the search for it is more important than the truth itself. Deep in the darkness of a cave, prisoners sit, bound and fixed in place. They have been there for as long as they can remember, their bodies motionless, their heads turned toward a wall. Behind them, a fire burns, casting long shadows across the cave's cold stone surface. But the prisoners do not know this. All they can see are the shadows of objects that pass in front of the fire, projected onto the wall before them. The shadows dance, flicker, and move, but the prisoners are unaware of the true source of these images. They believe the shadows are reality, for they have never seen anything else. This is the essence of Plato's allegory of the cave. A metaphor for human perception, it asks us to question what we believe is real. Are we like those prisoners, limited by our senses, trapped in the dark, and convinced that the shadows we see on the wall are all there is to the world? Imagine the moment when one prisoner is freed, when they are untied and allowed to turn around. They are stunned, blinded by the light of the fire. For the first time, they see the source of the shadows, the objects that cast them. The prisoners thought they understood reality, but now they realize they've been living in a distorted, incomplete version of it. At first, the freed prisoner is overwhelmed. The light is too much, too intense. The shadows on the wall seem so much easier to understand, to accept. In the darkness there was comfort, there was certainty, but now, in the light, there is confusion, there is pain, there is a new world to comprehend, a new way of seeing. But as the freed prisoner's eyes adjust, they begin to understand. The objects casting the shadows are not the reality. They are mere representations, pale imitations of the true form of things. The light reveals the world as it truly is, not as the shadows on the wall made it seem. The prisoner sees the world in its richness, its depth, its fullness. This revelation is profound. The prisoner understands that their entire life, their entire understanding of the world, was based on illusions. The shadows were just shadows, reflections of something much greater, much more complex. And so the freed prisoner begins to walk, to explore, to experience the world beyond the cave. The truth, once glimpsed, becomes a path. But here's the catch: when the freed prisoner returns to the cave, to the other prisoners still chained and watching the shadows, they cannot comprehend what has changed. The light, the truth, is too much for them. The prisoners are still bound to the shadows, still convinced that what they see is all there is. They reject the freed prisoner's knowledge, mocking the very idea that the shadows could be anything less than reality. In this allegory, Plato speaks not just of sight, but of knowledge itself. What if the world we see is only a fraction of what is real? What if our understanding of existence is like the shadows on the cave wall, distorted, incomplete, and perhaps fundamentally wrong? The allegory of the cave forces us to confront the possibility that there may be truths beyond our perception. Plato's allegory also explores the struggle between knowledge and ignorance. The prisoners, comfortable in their understanding, fear the unknown. They fear the light that would reveal the truth. And in their fear they resist change. They cling to the shadows, to the familiar, even as they prevent themselves from experiencing the fullness of life. In this way, the cave becomes a symbol for human ignorance. We are all in some ways prisoners in our own minds. We are limited by our senses, our culture, our experiences. We see the world only through the narrow lens of our perceptions, and we build our understanding of reality from that limited view. But the truth is far greater than we can imagine. Consider how we too live with shadows. We believe in the certainty of what we see, in the solid nature of what we touch. But how much of that is an illusion? How much of what we know about the world is just a reflection, a distortion of something deeper, something we cannot yet grasp? The cave, in its darkness becomes a metaphor for our own limited understanding. What if we are not just prisoners of sight, but prisoners of mind? What if the chains that bind us are the very thoughts and beliefs that we hold, the assumptions we make about the world, the boundaries we place on what is possible? How much of what we take for granted is just another shadow on the wall, waiting to be questioned, to be seen differently? The allegory of the cave invites us to ask, what are we missing? What truths have we yet to discover? What lies just beyond our reach, hidden in the light, waiting for us to look beyond the shadows and into the world of true knowledge? What would happen if we dared to step outside of our own caves, to question everything we've been taught, everything we think we know? And perhaps most profoundly, the allegory asks us about the nature of reality itself. How much of what we see is simply a projection, a reflection of a deeper truth? How much of the world is filtered through our perceptions, distorted by our senses, and how much of it lies beyond waiting to be understood? If we are all prisoners of our own minds, can we ever break free? Can we ever see the world as it truly is? The freed prisoner's journey is not just about discovering the truth, it is about the transformation of the self. The truth changes us. It forces us to see the world differently, to think differently, to understand our place in the universe differently. It challenges everything we once believed, and in that challenge, there is growth, there is enlightenment, and there is freedom. But the journey is not easy. To leave the cave, to step into the light, is to embrace discomfort, confusion, and doubt. It is to abandon the comfort of the shadows for the unknown, for the possibility of a deeper, richer existence. It is to risk everything for the sake of truth, and yet, in the end, it is the only path to true knowledge. The allegory of the cave, then, is not just a story about light and darkness. It is a profound meditation on perception, knowledge, and the nature of reality. It reminds us that the world we see is not always the world that is. It encourages us to look beyond the surface, to seek out the deeper truths that lie hidden just beyond the shadows. You close your eyes, and for a moment, everything disappears. The world you once knew, the objects that surrounded you, vanish into nothingness. Now, what if I told you that the very act of closing your eyes means that the world ceases to exist at all? At least in a way, that's what Berkeley believed. George Berkeley, an 18th century philosopher, proposed a radical idea. He argued that objects do not exist independently of our perception of them. Instead, they exist only as we perceive them. Without perception, they simply do not exist. This idea is known as Berkeley's idealism, and it challenges the very foundation of how we think about reality. In Berkeley's view, the world is nothing more than a series of ideas in the mind. Everything we see, touch, taste, and hear is just a perception in our consciousness. Trees, mountains, the sky, even people, all are simply ideas that exist in the mind of the observer. They don't exist outside of our perception. To exist is to be perceived. But what about the world we experience when we're not looking at it? The world, it seems, continues to exist even when we're not observing it. For Berkeley, this isn't a problem. He argued that the existence of the world relies not on human perception, but on the perception of a higher mind, a divine mind, that of God. God, for Berkeley, is the ultimate perceiver, and everything in the world exists because God perceives it. The idea is a little unsettling at first. What does it mean if the reality we experience is just a series of ideas in our minds? How can something be real if it only exists when we perceive it? Berkeley's answer is that reality is real, not because it is physically there, but because it exists in the mind. To exist is to be perceived by someone, whether that someone is us or a greater consciousness. Berkeley's idealism flips the way we think about the world. We are so accustomed to believing that things exist independently of our minds that they would continue to exist whether or not we perceive them. But Berkeley suggests that the very concept of existence is inseparable from perception. Without perception, there is no reality. Imagine a forest, silent and empty, where no one is around to hear the rustling leaves. For Berkeley, This forest doesn't truly exist, at least not in the way we usually think about existence. The rustling of the leaves is not something that happens on its own. It is something that exists in the mind of the observer. Without an observer, there are no leaves, no sound, no forest. But Berkeley's idealism doesn't stop there. If all that exists is perception, then it leads us to ask, what is the nature of those perceptions? Are they all simply ideas in our minds, fleeting and subjective? Or is there something more to it, a deeper, more coherent reality that unites our perceptions, giving us a shared experience of the world? The world, according to Berkeley, is a vast network of interconnected ideas. Our perceptions may differ, but they are part of a greater whole, an ordered, coherent reality that is maintained by God. It is not random, nor is it chaotic. The world is a structured collection of ideas, always in relation to one another, even if we cannot always see how they fit together. This raises another question. If reality is a collection of ideas in the mind, can we ever truly know anything outside of ourselves? Is reality simply a reflection of our own minds, or is there something more? Berkeley believed that the structure of the world is ultimately grounded in the mind of God, and that our perceptions, though subjective, are not arbitrary. They are shaped by a divine order, a coherence that we cannot always understand, but can always trust. The implications of Berkeley's idealism are profound. If the world is only what we perceive, then what does it mean to be real? Does a tree exist only when we look at it? Does a star only exist when we see it twinkling in the sky? For Berkeley, these things exist, but only because they are perceived, either by us or by God. Reality, then, is a perpetual act of perception. But this view also forces us to reconsider what we mean by truth. If all that exists is perception, then truth cannot be an objective, external fact. Truth is simply the consistency of perception, the coherence of the ideas we experience. In a way, Berkeley's idealism suggests that reality is a collective agreement, a shared experience created by the perceptions of all minds, divine or human. And yet the notion that reality is an idea in the mind is both liberating and limiting. It suggests that we are not passive observers of the world, but active participants in its creation. Our perceptions shape the world, but we also shape each other's perceptions. Reality is not something that happens to us. It is something we participate in, something we create together. But even as we create this shared reality, we are still bound by the limits of our perceptions. We cannot see the world as it truly is, only as it appears to us. And because our perceptions are shaped by our own minds, we can never fully escape the subjective nature of our experience. We are always within the world we create, seeing it through the lens of our own consciousness. This idea might make you pause. If everything we perceive is just an idea in our minds, what does that say about the nature of existence? Are we all just living in our own heads, experiencing different versions of the world, connected only by the fact that we share some of the same perceptions? And if reality is nothing but perception, how do we know what is true or what is real? Berkeley's idealism challenges us to reconsider the way we experience the world. It asks us to think about perception not as something passive, but as something active. We do not simply see the world as it is, we create it with our minds. And in doing so, we participate in a greater divine order that holds everything together. In the end, Berkeley's philosophy leaves us with a profound question. If reality exists only as we perceive it, then what does it mean to truly know something? What is the difference between perception and reality? And if everything we experience is simply an idea in the mind, what does that say about the nature of existence itself? Perhaps the answer is simple. Reality is not something to be understood, but something to be experienced. Perception itself is the ultimate reality, and through it, we touch the divine order that sustains the world. Reality is a fluid, ever-changing dance of ideas, a continuous act of creation in the mind of God, and we too are part of that creation. You close your eyes, and in an instant, you are elsewhere. A different world unfolds before you, one filled with strange landscapes, people, and experiences. But as you drift deeper, you begin to wonder, how do you know this world is real? What if it's just a dream? This is the core of Descartes' dream argument, a question that shakes the very foundation of reality. Descartes, a French philosopher, pondered the nature of existence by considering whether our waking experiences could be distinguished from dreams. In a dream, everything seems real, doesn't it? The touch of a loved one, the taste of food, the feeling of the sun on your skin, all of it feels vivid and true until you wake up. But what if waking life is the same? What if, just like dreams, everything we experience, the sensations, the perceptions, the thoughts, is nothing more than a trick, a creation of our minds? Descartes proposed that there is no clear distinction between the waking world and the world of dreams. How can we be certain that what we perceive in our waking hours is not just another vivid dream? This leads to a deep question. Can we ever truly trust our senses? Our senses tell us that the world is solid, tangible, real. We see the sun rise and set. We feel the ground beneath our feet. We hear the sound of rain on the roof. But these same senses can deceive us, creating illusions, dreams within dreams. In a dream, everything appears to follow the rules of the world we know, but it can all unravel at any moment. Things shift, distort, and dissolve. But when we wake up, the dream fades, revealing the truth. Descartes asks, how do we know that our waking life won't dissolve in the same way, leaving us in the realization that it too was only a dream? If our senses can be so easily deceived in dreams, how can we trust them when we are awake? If everything we experience could simply be an illusion created by our mind, then how can we be certain of anything at all? Descartes' dream argument takes us to the edge of doubt, questioning the very reality we take for granted. In this state of doubt, Descartes turns inward. He begins with the one thing he knows for certain, that he is thinking. In the act of doubting, he confirms his own existence. Even if everything around him is a dream, he must exist to have the thought that everything might be a dream. I think, therefore I am, he declares. This is the foundation of his philosophy. But what about the world outside? What about the objects, the people, the laws of nature that seem to persist no matter how we feel? Descartes suggests that perhaps these things exist only because we perceive them. In a dream, the world appears solid and real, yet it is entirely constructed by the mind. Could it be that the same is true for our waking world? This raises another unsettling thought. If everything is simply a creation of our mind, how do we know it wasn't created by some higher intelligence, like a dreamer dreaming us into existence? Descartes, in his exploration of doubt, leaves open the possibility that an external force, whether a god or some other entity, could be responsible for creating the illusion of reality. But if all of this is just an illusion, what does that say about our perceptions of time, space, and causality? In a dream, time can stretch and compress, space can warp and bend. The laws of nature no longer hold true, and yet in the dream, they feel just as real as they do when we are awake. If the rules of the dream can so easily shift, why couldn't the same be true of the waking world? The more Descartes contemplates, the more the lines between dream and reality blur. Perhaps, he suggests, the very act of questioning reality is what brings us closer to the truth. After all, it is only through doubt that we come to understand what we can truly know. But what if the nature of reality is not something we can fully comprehend, even if we doubt everything? In the dream argument, Descartes ultimately leaves us with a sense of uncertainty. If the world could be a dream, how do we know it isn't? If we can't trust our senses, then what can we trust? The only certainty, it seems, is that we exist in some form, even if that existence is nothing more than a fleeting dream. This uncertainty can be unsettling, yet it also offers a sense of freedom. If reality is truly a dream, then perhaps it is not as fixed as we believe. Perhaps it is malleable, fluid, something we shape with our thoughts and perceptions. In a dream, we can be anyone, go anywhere, do anything. And in waking life, could it be that we have the same potential, The dream argument, in its simplicity, cuts to the heart of the human condition. It challenges us to question not only what we perceive, but how we perceive it. It forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge, to accept that we may never truly know the nature of reality. Perhaps, in the end, it is not about finding the answer, but about embracing the mystery of it all. And so, as you drift deeper into sleep, the boundary between dream and waking begins to blur. You may find yourself questioning whether you are truly awake, or if you are simply dreaming. The world around you, the sensations, the thoughts, the experiences, may feel just as real as any dream, and yet you cannot be certain. For now the question lingers, is this real, or is this just another dream? And as you sink further into slumber, the answer may fade away, leaving only the soft rhythm of your breath, the quiet hum of the world, and the gentle sway of the dream you are about to enter. You stand at the edge of a vast, serene lake. The water reflects the sky above, calm and undisturbed. But as you gaze deeper, a thought occurs to you: is the lake truly there, or is it merely a reflection of your mind? What if the world we see isn't as it seems, but only what we perceive? This is the essence of phenomenalism, a philosophical view that challenges the idea of an objective reality existing independently of our perception. Phenomenalism suggests that objects do not exist in the way we traditionally think about them. Instead, they exist only as we perceive them, in the form of sensations, experiences, and perceptions. Imagine for a moment that the lake is not there at all when you turn away. It only exists in the moments when you are observing it. When you stop looking, the lake ceases to exist, vanishing into the shadows of the unknown. To exist, according to phenomenalism, is to be perceived, to be the object of experience. What if everything around you, every tree, every stone, every person, is merely a set of experiences, a collection of perceptions, flickering in and out of existence as you engage with them? The world, then, is not a fixed, objective reality. It is a series of phenomena, constantly shifting, emerging only through your senses, and dissolving when you are not aware of them. In this view, reality is not separate from us. It is bound to us. It is the product of our perceptions, the result of our senses interacting with the world. The world is not out there, existing independently. It is in here, in our minds, constantly changing as we observe it, touch it, feel it. Objects exist only as long as we are conscious of them. Phenomenalism suggests that objects do not have inherent properties independent of our perception. The color of the lake, the texture of the stone, the weight of the air, these are not intrinsic qualities of the objects themselves. They are merely the way our senses interpret the world. The world exists as a collection of experiences, not as an external, unchanging reality. But here is where it gets interesting. Even if we can't know the world outside of our perceptions, even if objects only exist when we experience them, there still seems to be some order to the world. The lake does not shift its shape or color every time we blink. The world remains relatively stable, suggesting that perception is not just a random occurrence, but something more structured, more reliable. This leads to a delicate balance. Phenomenalism asks us to consider that while the world we perceive may not be real in the traditional sense, it is still something we can rely on, something that behaves in consistent, predictable ways. The laws of nature, the patterns of life, the movement of the stars, all of these seem to be constant, even though they are tied to our perception. But what does this mean for the nature of truth? If the world exists only as we experience it, then how do we know what is true? Can there be an objective truth, a truth that exists independently of our perception, or is all truth a matter of subjective experience? According to phenomenalism, truth is not something out there waiting to be discovered. It is something we create in our minds, through our perceptions and experiences. And yet this raises a deeper question: is there a difference between the experiences we have and the reality we think we know? In the same way that a dream feels real when we're inside it, can the experiences we have of the world be trusted as a reflection of something outside our minds? Or is reality itself nothing more than a dream, fleeting and intangible? This view forces us to confront the nature of our existence. If the world is only what we perceive, then what are we, the perceivers? Are we the creators of reality, shaping it with our senses, our thoughts, and our beliefs? Or are we passive observers, trapped in a world that only exists because we are aware of it? Phenomenalism challenges us to question whether we are the masters of our own world or simply participants in an ongoing play of perceptions. The implications of phenomenalism extend beyond perception itself. If objects only exist when we perceive them, then the world becomes fluid, temporary, a construct that is continuously shaped and reshaped by the minds that interact with it. Nothing is fixed, nothing is permanent. The world is an ongoing dance of experience, a cycle of creation and dissolution. This idea can be liberating. If reality is not fixed, but instead malleable, then perhaps we have more control over it than we think. We shape the world with our perception. We create it as we experience it, moment by moment. The world is not something outside of us, something to be understood or conquered. It is something to be engaged with, shaped by the way we see it, and yet there is a quiet sadness in this view. If reality is a product of our perception, does it lose some of its meaning? Does the lake lose its majesty when we realize that it only exists because we are looking at it? Does the world lose its depth when we see it as a mere reflection, a shadow of something more? Phenomenalism forces us to confront the fragility of reality, its evanescence, but perhaps it is this very fragility that makes the world so precious. If reality is not permanent, if it is constantly shifting with each perception, then the moments we experience it become all the more meaningful. The beauty of the lake, the quiet of the night, the warmth of the sun, they are fleeting, yes, but they are real in the moment we experience them. So the question becomes, what is real? If reality is not independent of us, but exists only in our minds, then perhaps the real question is not whether the world is fixed, but how we choose to experience it. Reality is not something we need to understand in absolute terms. It is something we experience, something we live. The world, as phenomenalism suggests, is a canvas for our senses. It is an ever-changing painting, constantly shifting, created by the mind in every moment. There is no fixed reality, no permanent truth. There is only experience, perception, the dance of awareness and existence. Reality is a world of phenomena, always in flux, always evolving as we interact with it. In this view, reality is not an external world, but an internal experience. We are the creators of the world we know, and in that creation, we are free. The lake exists as we perceive it, the trees stand as we see them, and the sun sets as we witness it. The world is a reflection of our minds, and in that reflection, we find our place in the universe. Imagine you are holding a map. The lines, the markings, the contours, they all represent something real, something out there in the world. But what happens when you step away from the map and look at the world itself? The map, despite its accuracy, is not the world. It is merely a representation. This is the core of the map territory problem, a philosophical idea that challenges the relationship between symbols and reality. The map is a model, a reflection of the territory it aims to describe, but it can never be the territory itself. No matter how detailed, no matter how precise, the map will always be limited, a mere imitation of something far more complex. The world is vast, chaotic, and rich with detail, but the map, no matter how intricate, can only capture a fraction of that complexity. It simplifies, condenses, and abstracts the world into symbols, lines, and shapes. But the map is never the thing itself. It's always a representation, an interpretation of reality, not reality itself. In this view, the map is a tool, a way of understanding the world, but it can never capture its full depth. We use maps to navigate, to make sense of the vastness around us, but the map itself is always limited. It offers a glimpse, but it can never replace the world it attempts to depict. What does this mean for our perception of reality? If we consider all the symbols, all the language, all the concepts we use to describe the world, are they not just maps? Our ideas of the world, our theories, our beliefs, they are all representations, models we create to make sense of the world. But just as the map is not the territory, these ideas are not the reality they attempt to describe. The map territory problem forces us to confront the limitations of language and thought. We construct models of the world, but those models are always incomplete. We create concepts, ideas, and beliefs to navigate our existence, but they can never fully capture the complexity of the world itself. They are representations, not truths. Even when we try to represent the world with the greatest precision, we cannot escape this gap. A map that perfectly mirrors every detail of the territory would still be just a map. The very act of creating a map is an act of abstraction, a process of simplification. No matter how much information we include, the map is not the thing itself. This problem extends beyond maps. We use language to describe the world, to express our thoughts, to communicate, but language too is just a map. Words are symbols that represent concepts, but they are not the concepts themselves. In trying to describe reality, we are constantly translating it into a language that cannot fully capture its essence. Think about it. When we speak of a tree, we use a word, a symbol, to represent it. But the word tree is not the tree. It is only a tool for communicating an idea about the tree. The same is true for everything we describe. The language we use is always one step removed from the reality it aims to represent. This raises a question: if all we have are maps, symbols, and abstractions, can we ever truly know the territory? Can we ever truly experience the world as it is, without the filter of our perceptions, our concepts, and our language? If the map is not the territory, then what is left when we remove all the maps? In a way, this is the fundamental dilemma of human existence. We live in a world of representations, always perceiving the world through filters, through concepts, through the language we use to describe it. But these filters are not the world itself. They are only partial reflections, imperfect models of something far greater. Yet the map territory problem doesn't suggest that maps or symbols are useless. Quite the opposite. Maps are essential for navigating the world. They help us make sense of things, orient ourselves, and communicate with others. But we must always remember that the map is not the thing itself. It is a tool, not the reality it represents. This paradox lies at the heart of human understanding. We constantly create representations of the world, from maps to models to theories. And while these representations are useful, they are always incomplete. The map cannot be the territory. Our knowledge, our understanding of the world, is always partial, always limited, but perhaps that is the beauty of it. If the map is not the territory, then the territory remains infinite, unknowable, beyond our reach. The world is not something we can fully capture, fully comprehend, or fully understand. It is vast, mysterious, and always just beyond the limits of our perceptions, and yet we continue to map it. We continue to create models, to build frameworks for understanding. The map territory problem reminds us that these frameworks, these models, are essential, but they are never the final truth. The world is more than we can ever represent. It is a territory we can never fully map, a mystery that eludes our grasp. Perhaps, in the end, the greatest wisdom is to recognize that the map is not the territory, but it is still a map worth using. We may never fully know the world, but we can navigate it, explore it, and experience it through the maps we create. The map is not the reality, but it is the tool that allows us to engage with it. The map territory problem is a reminder that there is always more to reality than we can ever comprehend. No matter how sophisticated our maps, no matter how precise our models, the world will always be something more than we can represent. And in that recognition, there is both a humbling truth and a sense of wonder. You sit in a quiet room, gazing at a simple object, a cup perhaps, or a stone. You focus on its shape, its texture, its color. The object seems so solid, so real, But then a thought comes to mind: how do I know the object is truly as I perceive it? This is the problem of perception. It's a fundamental question that challenges the very nature of reality. We believe that what we see, hear, touch, and taste is an accurate reflection of the world around us. But is it? Are we really experiencing the world as it is, or are we simply interpreting it through our senses, each perception shaped by the limitations of our mind? Our senses are often our primary connection to the world, yet they are far from perfect. The colors we see are not the same for everyone. What you perceive as red might not be the same shade of red that someone else perceives. Even the simple act of seeing is filled with assumptions, interpretations, and imperfections. But beyond the subjectivity of color, there's a deeper problem. When you look at an object, you don't see it directly. What you see is a series of signals sent to your brain by your eyes, processed and interpreted by your mind. In a sense, your mind is creating the object, not merely receiving it. But if the object is only a product of your perception, can you ever truly know what it is in itself? Take a moment to consider this. Everything you know about the world comes through the filter of your perception. The texture of the stone you hold in your hand, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees, these experiences are not the world itself, but your mind's interpretation of it. The problem of perception lies in the gap between what is out there and how we experience it. This gap creates a puzzle. If we cannot know the world except through our senses, how can we be certain that what we experience is the truth? Are we living in an illusion, seeing only the world as it appears to us and never as it truly is? Is there a world beyond our perception that we can never access? Consider the idea that the world itself is not a fixed, unchanging reality, but a construct of your mind. Just as a dream shapes itself around your thoughts, perceptions, and desires, perhaps the waking world shapes itself around your senses. What you experience is a result of how your mind processes the raw data it receives, a continuous creation of the world as you know it. This leads us to ask, if our senses are the only connection we have to the world, and those senses are inherently flawed and subjective, can we ever trust our experiences? Every perception, every moment of seeing, hearing, or feeling is tinged with the limitations of our mind. And in this, perception becomes not a window to the truth, but a filter that shapes it. Philosophers have long wrestled with the problem of perception. Some argue that we can never truly know the world as it is. We are bound by the limitations of our senses, and all we can ever know is how the world appears to us. Others suggest that while our perceptions are limited, they still give us a reliable, though incomplete, picture of the world around us. But what about when our perceptions deceive us? We know that illusions exist when we see objects that aren't there, or when we hear sounds that aren't real. Our senses can be tricked, and our minds can create false experiences. In these moments, the world we perceive becomes even more distant from the world that truly is. Even in our everyday experiences, our perceptions can be clouded by our emotions, our expectations, and our previous knowledge. The way we see the world is influenced not just by the raw data our senses collect, but by the mental frameworks we already carry. The world is filtered through our mind, colored by our thoughts and beliefs. This brings us to another question. If perception is not an objective process, then what does it mean to know something? Can knowledge be objective, or is it always subjective, shaped by the mind's interpretations and limitations? If our understanding of the world is always mediated by perception, how can we ever truly know anything outside of ourselves? Yet despite these uncertainties, we continue to trust our perceptions. We walk through the world as if the ground beneath our feet is solid, as if the objects we see are truly there. We rely on our senses to navigate, to communicate, to make sense of the world. And in doing so, we continue to live as though our perceptions are accurate reflections of reality. But perhaps that's the paradox. We know on some level that our perceptions are not perfect. We know that we cannot fully trust them, and yet we rely on them every day. The problem of perception doesn't just show us the limits of our senses, it highlights our reliance on them, despite their imperfections. In a way, this problem opens up a deeper question about the nature of existence itself. If we cannot trust our perceptions, then what is reality? Is reality something objective, something that exists independently of us? Or is it something that is created by our perceptions, a constantly shifting construct, always dependent on the mind that experiences it? We might never fully resolve the problem of perception, but in recognizing it, we can begin to understand our relationship with the world. We are not passive observers, but active participants in the creation of reality. Every moment of perception is an act of creation, a shaping of the world around us. In the end, the problem of perception invites us to question not only what we know but how we know it. It reminds us that our understanding of the world is always mediated by our senses and that those senses are inherently flawed. But it also invites us to see the beauty in this, in the mystery of perception and the endless journey of discovery that it offers. Perhaps in the quiet of the night, as you drift closer to sleep, you will begin to wonder about the world beyond your perception. What is real, and what is simply a creation of your mind? And as the thoughts fade into the distance, you may find comfort in the uncertainty, in the gentle unfolding of reality, piece by piece. You open your eyes to a world filled with color, sound, and sensation. The room you're in seems so real, its walls, the furniture, the soft light spilling through the window. You can feel the warmth of the sunlight on your skin, hear the distant hum of the world outside. But what if all of this is not directly in front of you? This is the heart of indirect realism, a philosophical perspective that suggests the world we experience is not the world itself, but a representation, an interpretation of something far more complex. Our senses take in data from the world, but they do not present it to us as it is. Instead, they deliver a mediated version. Imagine, if you will, that what you see before you, the room, the objects, the light, is not what is actually out there. What you experience is a mental construct, a picture created in your mind based on sensory information. The world we perceive is not the world itself, but a version of it, shaped by our mind's interpretation of sensory data. In this view, objects don't directly present themselves to us. Instead, we experience their qualities, color, texture, sound, and shape through the filter of our senses. The world is not directly accessible. It must first pass through the lens of our perception. The sensation of the room, the warmth, the color of the walls, is all constructed by our mind based on sensory input. This challenges the idea of direct realism, which claims that we experience the world as it truly is, without any mediation. Indirect realism, however, tells us that our senses act as intermediaries, relaying information about the world to our minds. They do not give us the world in its raw form, but a version of it that is colored by the nature of our perception. Think about the way you perceive a tree. What you experience, the color, the shape, the texture, is not the tree itself. You are experiencing the tree as it is reflected and processed by your senses. The tree in itself is something separate, existing beyond your immediate perception, and what you perceive is merely a representation of that reality. This process of mediation raises a question: how can we be sure that what we perceive corresponds to the world as it truly is, if our senses are the only means by which we interact with the world, and those senses are limited and subjective? How do we know we are perceiving the world accurately? Could we be experiencing a distorted version of reality, shaped by our senses, rather than the world as it is? Indirection in perception means we are never in direct contact with the world. We interact with representations of the world, images, sounds, sensations, but the world itself remains beyond our immediate grasp. Our senses build a bridge between us and the world, but that bridge may never truly carry us to the truth. What we experience is only a map of the territory, never the territory itself. But this doesn't mean that our perception is without value. Indirect realism does not suggest that the world is entirely beyond our reach, but that our experience of it is mediated by our minds. We can trust our perceptions to an extent, but we must acknowledge that they are not infallible. Our senses offer us a version of reality, one that is useful, but not absolute. This idea calls into question the nature of knowledge itself. If what we experience is always mediated by perception, then how can we ever know anything with certainty? If we cannot directly access the world, then our understanding of it must always be an approximation, a model of reality that we must continually refine and question. But indirect realism also gives us a fascinating perspective on the nature of experience. The world we perceive is not something static, fixed in place, but a dynamic interplay of sensory data and mental processing. The colors, sounds, and textures we experience are the result of this ongoing interaction. In a sense, we are constantly co-creating our experience of the world with our senses and our mind. This raises a deeper question. If the world is always mediated by perception, then can we ever know the world as it truly is? Is the reality out there a mystery, forever beyond our reach, always filtered through the lens of our senses? Indirect realism suggests that while we may never fully grasp the true nature of the world, we can still engage with it, navigate it, and make sense of it through our perceptions. In this way, perception becomes a kind of art. We are constantly interpreting the world, shaping it, and making it our own. Every sensation we experience, every sight, sound, touch, is an interpretation, a creative act of the mind. And through this act, we come to know the world, even if that knowledge is always indirect. Yet there's a quiet humility in this view. If we are always interpreting the world through our senses, then we must accept that our knowledge is inherently limited. No matter how much we study the world, no matter how finely we tune our instruments of perception, we will never be able to see the world in its entirety. Our understanding is always partial, always mediated. But even with these limitations, the world remains open to us. We may never see the raw world, but we experience it through a richness of perception. The colors we see, the sounds we hear, the shapes we touch, they are the world we know, and they shape our lives. Indirect realism, rather than diminishing our experience, invites us to appreciate the complexity and depth of our perceptions. In the end, indirect realism reminds us that perception is not just a passive act, but an active one. We are constantly engaged with the world, constantly interpreting it, constructing it in our minds. Reality is not something we passively observe, but something we actively create, mediated through our senses, shaped by our perceptions. As you relax and drift deeper into thought, let the idea of mediated reality settle into your mind. The world is never as we directly experience it, and yet it is always present, waiting for us to engage with it. What we see, feel, and hear is a reflection of a world we cannot directly touch, but in that reflection, we find our place within it. You open your eyes to the world around you. The sunlight filters through the window, casting soft shadows across the floor. The walls are sturdy, the objects in the room familiar. You know what you see, you trust your senses. The world is exactly as it appears to be, or is it? This is the belief at the heart of naive realism. According to naive realism, the world we experience is exactly as it is. What we see, hear, touch, and feel is a direct reflection of the world outside of us. There is no filter, no distortion. The world is simply what our senses show us, nothing more. In this view, when you look at a tree, the tree you see is the tree as it truly is. The color, the shape, the texture, they all belong to the tree itself, not to your mind's interpretation. Your senses are accurate, and they present the world to you as it truly exists, without any interference from the mind. Naive realism suggests a simplicity and clarity. The world around you is stable, unchanging, and direct. You experience it as it is, and there is no need for interpretation, no need for layers of mediation. The objects you encounter are real in the most direct sense. What you see is what is there. But this belief is challenged by the subtle complexities of perception. Consider for a moment that the color you see in the world is not the color that objectively exists in the world. Color is not a property of the object itself. It is the result of how your eyes process light, how your brain interprets wavelengths. The object's color is an illusion, shaped by your perception. If color is not inherent in objects, then what else might be? Shape, texture, sound. Each of these qualities exists only as your senses interpret them. A sound is not simply a sound, it is a vibration that your ears process, a signal that your brain decodes. What you perceive as a sound is only a reflection of these physical processes. Suddenly the clarity of naive realism begins to crack. The world you see is not as simple as it seemed. What you experience is not a direct reflection of reality, but a version of it, shaped by your senses and the way your brain processes sensory information. What you see is not the world itself, but an interpretation of it. And then there is the mind. If your senses are only presenting an interpretation of reality, then how much of what you experience is shaped by your mind? Every perception, every sensation is processed by your brain, filtered through the lens of your consciousness. The world, in a sense, is something you actively create with your mind, not something that is simply out there. As you look deeper into the collapse of naive realism, you begin to question everything you thought you knew about the world. What is the nature of reality if we are never truly experiencing it directly? How can we trust our senses if they only give us an interpretation, a constructed version of the world? What is real if perception is so fragile, so malleable? Naive realism assumes that objects exist independently of our perception of them, that they have an essence that remains unchanged, whether or not anyone is looking at them. But if we cannot directly experience the world, how can we be certain of this? Perhaps the world we see is not fixed, but contingent on our perception, constantly shifting and reshaping itself in the act of observation. The collapse of naive realism opens up a world of uncertainty. If we cannot be certain that our perceptions are a true reflection of the world, how do we navigate our existence? If what we see, feel, and hear is only an interpretation, how do we trust what we know? The world begins to blur, and with it, our sense of reality. Perhaps then, the very idea of direct experience is an illusion. Perhaps we are always in a state of mediation, always filtering the world through our senses, our thoughts, and our memories. What we call reality is never truly experienced, but always a construct, always a representation of something that is just out of reach. Yet there is a beauty in this uncertainty. The collapse of naive realism forces us to confront the limits of our perception, but it also invites us to embrace the mystery of existence. If the world is not as fixed as we thought, then maybe it is more fluid, more open to interpretation. Perhaps reality is something we co-create, not something we passively observe. In this view, reality is not an external static thing. It is a dance between our senses and our mind, between the world we perceive and the mind that interprets it. What we experience is not a direct reflection of the world, but an ongoing process of interaction, a negotiation between what is out there and what is in here. The collapse of naive realism, then, does not leave us in a state of despair. It offers us the opportunity to explore the world with a new perspective. We no longer see the world as something fixed and unchanging, but as something dynamic, something we engage with and shape through our perceptions, our thoughts, and our consciousness. This shift in perspective allows us to see the world in all its complexity. Reality is no longer something we passively accept, but something we actively participate in. Our perceptions may be imperfect, but they are also a gateway to understanding, a way to explore the world's depth, its richness, and its mystery. And so the collapse of naive realism opens up a space for deeper inquiry, for a more nuanced relationship with the world. We begin to see that the world is not something we can simply know in a direct way. It is something we must engage with, something we must interpret, something we must experience with all of our senses and our mind. You look at the world around you, a quiet room bathed in soft light. Every object seems familiar, each surface, each corner, a part of the world you know. But what if this world, as you experience it, is not the world itself? What if there's something beyond your perception, something hidden from view? This is the essence of Kant's noumenal versus phenomenal distinction. Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, proposed that there is a fundamental difference between the world as we perceive it and the world as it truly is. The world we experience, he argues, is only a fraction of reality, a filtered, constructed version of something much deeper and unknowable. Kant's philosophy divides reality into two realms, the phenomenal and the noumenal. The phenomenal world is the world of appearances, the world we experience through our senses. It is the world of perception, where objects seem to have properties, colors, shapes, sounds. This is the reality we interact with every day, the reality we feel, touch, and see. But the noumenal world, according to Kant, lies beyond our perception. It is the world as it truly is, independent of our senses and our minds. This realm is not accessible to us. We cannot see it, hear it, or touch it, because our perception is limited to the phenomenal. The noumenal is something beyond our grasp, something we can never directly experience. This distinction raises a deep question. If we can never experience the noumenal world, how can we know it exists? How can we be certain that there is a reality beyond our perception? Kant's answer is that while we cannot know the noumenal directly, we can infer its existence. The very act of perception, the very structure of our experience, suggests that there is something beyond it, something that makes the phenomenal world possible. Kant believed that our minds play an active role in shaping the world we experience. The phenomenal world is not simply given to us, as it is. It is constructed by our senses, which organize and interpret the raw data they receive. Space, time, causality, these are not inherent qualities of the objects we see. They are categories of the mind, ways in which we organize our experience. But this leaves us with a paradox. If the phenomenal world is a product of our minds, how can we trust it to reflect the noumenal world accurately? After all, the way we perceive the world is not the way it truly is. It is filtered through our senses and shaped by our cognitive structures. The phenomenal world is a representation, not the thing itself. Yet Kant suggests that while our perception may not be perfect, it is still reliable. Our senses give us a version of reality that allows us to navigate the world, to live and act within it. The categories our mind uses, space, time, causality, are necessary for us to make sense of the world, even though they may not correspond exactly to the way things are in the noumenal realm. In this view, the noumenal world is not something we can ever directly access or understand. It is a realm beyond human experience, beyond the limits of our senses, but that does not mean it is irrelevant. The noumenal world is the foundation of the phenomenal world. Without it, our perceptions would have no grounding, no basis in reality. Kant's distinction also challenges the very idea of objective knowledge. If we cannot access the noumenal world directly, then all knowledge is, in a sense, limited. We can never know things as they are in themselves, only as they appear to us. Our knowledge is always mediated by our senses, shaped by the categories of the mind. But this doesn't mean that our perception is meaningless. On the contrary, Kant argued that the phenomenal world is the only reality we can know, and it is still deeply meaningful. We interact with it, navigate it, and live within it. While we can never fully know the noumenal, we can live a rich and meaningful life within the bounds of our perception. This distinction invites us to rethink the very nature of reality. If we can never directly know the noumenal world, does that mean reality is ultimately unknowable? Kant suggests that reality is not something we can fully grasp, but that doesn't mean it is meaningless. Our perceptions, though limited, are still a valid way of engaging with the world. In this way, Kant's philosophy doesn't lead to despair. Instead, it offers a profound insight into the nature of human experience. We are not passive recipients of a fixed, unchanging reality. Instead, we actively construct our experience of the world, shaping it with our minds and our senses. Our knowledge may be partial, but it is still a meaningful reflection of the world we inhabit. At the same time, Kant's distinction reminds us of the limits of our understanding. The world we experience is not the world itself, but a representation of it. And though we can never access the noumenal directly, the very fact that we experience the phenomenal suggests that there is something beyond, something greater, that shapes our reality. Kant's noumenal versus phenomenal distinction forces us to confront the boundaries of human knowledge. It invites us to embrace the mystery of reality, to acknowledge that there is always more than meets the eye. While we may never fully understand the noumenal, we can still engage with the phenomenal world, finding meaning, beauty, and truth in the experience it offers. In the end, the distinction does not diminish reality. It deepens it, reminding us that what we experience is not all there is, but a glimpse of something greater. Reality is not static or fixed, but a dynamic interaction between our minds and the world around us, forever shaped by the limits of our perception. You sit quietly in a room, gazing at the world around you. The light falls softly through the window, casting shadows on the floor. Everything seems clear, vivid, real. But then, a thought drifts into your mind. What if everything you see is not the world itself, but a mere reflection, a shadow behind a veil? This is the concept of the veil of perception, a philosophical idea that suggests that our perception of the world is always filtered, always mediated by something beyond our control. What we experience, what we see is not the world as it truly is, but a version of it, shaped by our senses and minds. Imagine that every sensation you experience, every sight, sound, taste, and touch, is like a mist, a veil that separates you from the reality beyond. The light you see, the colors, the shapes, are not the things themselves, but merely their reflections, refracted through the lens of your senses. You are not in direct contact with the world, you are separated by this veil. The veil of perception suggests that our senses do not give us direct access to the world. Instead, they filter, distort, and transform the raw data they receive, presenting us with an image of reality that is shaped by our minds. What we perceive is always a construction, always a version of the world, never the world itself. Consider the colors you see in the world: red, blue, green. They are not properties of objects themselves, but the result of how your eyes interpret wavelengths of light. The color of the object is not in the object, but in your perception of it. In this way, your perception acts as a filter, a veil, between you and the world, but this veil extends beyond sight. All of our senses, taste, touch, hearing, are mediated by our mind, shaped by the way our brain processes sensory data. Every experience, every moment of perception is not a direct encounter with reality, but a mental reconstruction, a version of the world that has been filtered through our cognitive structures. This raises a fundamental question. If our perceptions are always mediated, can we ever know what the world is truly like? Can we ever experience the world without the veil of our senses, without the distortion of our minds? The veil of perception suggests that the world as it appears to us is always a projection, an interpretation, never the raw, unfiltered truth. Consider the idea that reality exists independently of our perception. The world continues to exist whether or not we are there to observe it. Yet for us, reality is always experienced through the veil. We can never know the world directly, but only through the lens of our perception. Our senses are not a window to reality, but a filter that shapes it. This problem leads to an interesting paradox. If we cannot experience the world directly, how can we know anything about it at all? Our knowledge of the world is always second-hand, always mediated by our senses and our interpretations. The veil prevents us from seeing the world as it truly is, yet it is through the veil that we live, navigate, and make sense of our existence. In a way, the veil of perception creates a distance between us and the world. We are never truly in direct contact with reality. Instead, we are always looking through the veil, seeing only a representation, a version of the world shaped by our minds. This distance can create a sense of separation, a feeling that we are never fully connected to the world around us. Yet, this distance does not necessarily diminish our experience. The veil may separate us from the world, but it also allows us to engage with it in meaningful ways. The veil shapes our perception, but it also gives us the ability to reflect, to interpret, to experience the world in complex and nuanced ways. Through the veil, we find meaning, connection, and understanding. The veil of perception challenges us to confront the limitations of our senses, but it also invites us to explore the richness of our experience. While we may never see the world as it truly is, we can still engage with it, navigate it, and find meaning in the way we perceive it. Our perceptions are not perfect, but they are still powerful. In this sense, the veil does not obscure the world entirely. It shapes the way we interact with reality, but it does not completely hide it. Through the veil, we can still find beauty, truth, and connection. The veil may limit our understanding, but it also opens up new possibilities for exploration and discovery. The veil of perception also raises questions about the nature of reality itself. If we can never directly access the world, then what is real? Is the world outside of us independent of our perception, or is it something we create in our minds? The veil invites us to reconsider the relationship between perception and reality, between what is and what we experience. Ultimately, the veil of perception forces us to accept that we can never fully know the world as it truly is. Our senses, though powerful, are always limited, always shaped by the veil. But this does not mean that our experience of the world is false or meaningless. It is simply an interpretation, a version of reality that we can navigate, explore, and understand. As you reflect on the veil of perception, it becomes clear that our experience of the world is always mediated, always shaped by our senses and our minds. The veil is not a barrier to understanding, but a part of how we engage with the world. Through it, we find meaning, connection, and a sense of belonging in the world around us. The veil may obscure the truth, but it also invites us to explore, to question, and to search for deeper understanding. We may never fully pierce the veil, but in doing so we begin to see the beauty and the mystery, the complexity of perception, and the infinite possibilities that lie beyond the veil. You sit quietly, alone with your thoughts, and the world around you seems clear, tangible. The chair you're sitting in, the light coming through the window, the soft hum of distant sounds, all of it feels real. But then, a quiet doubt arises. What if everything you're experiencing is just a creation of your mind? This is the essence of internal world skepticism. It suggests that we cannot be certain that the world outside of our mind exists as we perceive it. What if the world, the objects, the people we interact with, are nothing more than projections of our own thoughts, experiences, and imagination? The idea is simple, yet profound. We are certain of one thing: we are experiencing something. But is it the world, or is it only a world within us? Can we trust that the reality we experience is more than a mental construct? How can we be sure that the world we perceive is not just a figment of our consciousness? Think about your thoughts. When you have an idea, an image, or a memory, it seems real to you, doesn't it? You can feel it, see it, experience it. But these things exist only within your mind. What if the same is true of the world around you? What if the entire world is merely a mental creation, experienced as though it were real, but entirely internal? Internal world skepticism challenges the very nature of our reality. We know we experience something, but we cannot be certain that what we experience corresponds to anything beyond our mind. The chair you sit in, the air you breathe, the room you inhabit, what if these things are not external to you, but part of an inner world, a world your mind has created? This skepticism does not deny that we experience things. It simply questions the nature of those experiences. What we perceive is not necessarily the truth of the world outside us, but a representation, a mental picture painted by our minds. The world we think we know might be nothing more than a series of impressions, fragments of our own inner world. Imagine for a moment that everything you experience is shaped by your mind, from the smallest details to the grandest structures. The world as you know it is not directly accessible. Instead, it is filtered through your senses, your thoughts, your perceptions, all of which are created by your mind. The external world in this view is nothing more than a reflection of your inner state. Internal world skepticism forces us to confront the possibility that we may never know if the world outside of us truly exists. Everything we know, everything we experience, is seen through the lens of our mind. How can we be sure that the world is not just a dream, a projection, or an elaborate mental construct? This view doesn't necessarily mean that everything is illusionary. It simply asks us to question our assumptions. We may feel certain that the world exists out there beyond us, but how can we be sure? All we know is the world that our mind presents to us. Beyond that, there is only uncertainty, a vast unknown. Consider the idea that all our senses, the sight of the world, the touch of objects, the sound of voices, are part of the same mental construct. These sensations are not the world itself, but interpretations of it, filtered through our minds. In this way, even our most immediate experiences are suspect, shaped by a mind that might not be as objective as we assume. The implications of internal world skepticism are profound. If we cannot trust our perception of the external world, then what do we truly know? What can we be certain of, if everything we experience is filtered through our mental faculties? The world outside of us becomes distant, elusive, and perhaps unknowable. And yet this skepticism does not lead to a denial of experience. On the contrary, it invites us to reflect on the nature of that experience. If everything we perceive is shaped by our mind, then how much of our reality is a reflection of our thoughts, our desires, our fears? The external world becomes a mirror, reflecting our inner state back to us. Internal world skepticism also opens the door to a deeper exploration of consciousness itself. If we cannot be sure that the world exists beyond our mind, then what does it mean to be conscious? What is the nature of awareness, if all we know is a world that exists only within us? Consciousness becomes both the subject and the object of inquiry, a world in itself. Perhaps in embracing this skepticism, we begin to understand that reality is not something fixed, something solid and external. It is something fluid, dynamic, constantly shifting with our thoughts and perceptions. The world is not a static, unchanging thing, but an ongoing creation, shaped by the mind and experienced by the self. Yet this doesn't mean that the world is purely subjective. Even within the confines of our mind, there is a sense of order, coherence, and consistency. Our experiences, though filtered through our consciousness, follow patterns, abide by rules. The world we experience may be mental, but it is not entirely arbitrary. It is a reflection of something deeper, something structured. Internal world skepticism challenges us to accept that we may never fully know the nature of reality. But it also encourages us to embrace the mystery of existence, to acknowledge that the world we experience, though filtered and shaped by our mind, is still meaningful. The experiences we have, the world we live in, are still part of our journey, even if they are only known to us through our perception. Perhaps the most profound aspect of this skepticism is that it forces us to confront the limitations of our knowledge. If we cannot know the world as it truly is, then we must acknowledge the fragility of our understanding. What we know is never the whole story. We are always in the process of discovering, always in search of something beyond what we can perceive. And so as we drift into sleep, the world begins to fade. The sensations, the images, the thoughts, all of them are part of the mind's creation, part of the world we know. Whether that world exists beyond us or within us is a question we may never answer. But in that uncertainty, we find peace, knowing that the search for understanding is itself a journey worth taking. You sit quietly, your thoughts flowing gently, like a stream meandering through a peaceful landscape. You observe the world around you, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant hum of life outside. But what if this world, this experience, is not directly accessible? What if it's all a representation in your mind? This is the foundation of representational theories of mind. These theories suggest that the mind does not experience the world directly, but instead constructs representations, mental images, concepts, and symbols based on sensory input. What we perceive, then, is not the world itself, but a mental map or model of it, built in our minds. Imagine the world as a vast, complex tapestry of sensory data. Your eyes, ears, and other senses take in information, but your mind does not directly experience this data. Instead, it processes it, filtering and translating it into something you can understand. The objects, sounds, and textures you perceive are all representations, not the raw reality. In this view, the mind acts as an intermediary between you and the world. The objects and events around you do not appear directly in your consciousness. Instead, they are transformed into mental images, symbols, and concepts. What you experience is not the external world, but an internal representation of it, created by your mind. Consider the color red. What you see as red is not the color itself, but the way your mind interprets the wavelengths of light your eyes receive. The experience of red is a representation in your mind, a construct that allows you to interact with the world. In this way, all of your perceptions are mediated, not direct experiences of the world. The theory challenges the notion of direct realism, the belief that we perceive the world exactly as it is. Instead, representational theories of mind suggest that the world as we know it is always filtered through our cognitive processes. We don't see the world as it truly is, we see it as our minds represent it to us, shaped by our sensory input and mental faculties. This leads to an important question. If all we experience are representations, how can we know anything about the world itself? How can we be certain that our representations are accurate reflections of external reality, rather than distorted, incomplete models? The gap between perception and reality seems to grow wider the more we consider it. The answer lies in the understanding that while our representations may not be perfect, they allow us to function in the world. Even if we cannot access the world directly, our mental representations are still effective for navigating it. They help us understand, predict, and respond to our environment, even if those representations are not an exact replica of reality. In this view, knowledge becomes a process of constructing and refining mental representations. We don't simply passively receive information, we actively interpret, organize, and make sense of it. The mind shapes our experience of the world, creating models that allow us to navigate our existence. What we know is always a reflection of these mental models, not the unmediated truth. Yet representational theories also raise a deeper issue. If the mind constructs these representations, then to what extent are they influenced by our experiences, our emotions, and our biases? Our mental models of the world are shaped not just by raw sensory data, but by our beliefs, our culture, and our past experiences. These factors can color the way we perceive and interpret the world. This idea challenges the notion of objective perception. If our mental representations are influenced by our individual perspectives, then can we ever truly know the world as it is, independent of our minds? The line between subjective experience and objective reality begins to blur, leaving us to question the nature of truth itself. But despite these complexities, representational theories of mind offer a useful framework for understanding how we interact with the world. They allow us to acknowledge that while we may never directly experience the external world, our mental representations provide us with the tools to engage with it meaningfully. We live in a world of mental models, but these models help us navigate the world effectively. This approach also underscores the active nature of perception. We are not passive receivers of information, but active creators of our experience. Our minds shape the world we perceive, organizing sensory data into representations that make sense to us. In this way, perception is not a mirror of reality, but a dynamic process of mental construction. And yet the question remains, how accurate are these representations? How closely do they match the world as it truly is? Representational theories suggest that while our mental models are useful, they are not perfect copies of reality. Our experience of the world is always mediated, always an interpretation, and never the unfiltered truth. The implications of this theory extend beyond perception. They touch on how we understand the nature of knowledge itself. If all we know is based on representations, then knowledge is not about discovering the world as it truly is, but about refining the mental models we use to navigate it. We can never fully escape our minds, we can only work with the models they provide. Representational theories of mind invite us to consider the limits of our knowledge. If all we can ever know is a mental representation of the world, then how can we be certain of anything? Can we ever break free from the mental models that shape our understanding? The answer, perhaps, is not to seek an ultimate, unmediated truth, but to refine and question our models of reality. In the end, these theories reveal the fluid, dynamic nature of our experience. The world is not something fixed, something solid and objective. It is a world of representations, constantly reshaped by our minds. What we perceive is not the world as it truly is, but a mental models that allows us to interact with it, understand it, and live within it. So as you rest, let this idea settle into your mind. The world you know is not the world itself, but a reflection, a representation that allows you to navigate existence. It is not a static, fixed reality, but a mental model, a dance between perception and thought, constantly evolving as you interact with the world around you.